Is Red River going to save the Big 12 or is it going to severely damage the Big 12? Welcome in, everyone, to the Voice of College Football. We're talking Big 12 football with all of you for the next 2 or 3 hours right here at the Voice of College Football. Leave those comments and questions in the chat. You know the deal that you ultimately produce the show. Leave those super chats. We will be able to see those within all the comments and questions. We appreciate you being here to talk college football with all of us each and every day. One of the great rivalries of college football takes center stage for the last time as a Big 12 game, but we're talking entire Big 12 today, so we appreciate everybody stopping by. And again, we are going to do it up the best way possible. We got Josh Neighbors stopping by, the Neighborhood Watch. It's right here on YouTube. Josh, what's going on?
Mark, it's nice to see you again, man. How are you doing?
I am doing well. It's good to see you. Appreciate you leading us off today. Good source for the Big 12. I know you love this conference, have been following it, covering it forever. And let's get right to it, because I think the national narrative for a conference that, again, has experienced more change than any conference in college football, and the changes were obvious during the offseason, but now they've taken a hold on the field to a certain extent with 4 new members. But there was a rough week in week 2, and that grabs people's attention when Texas Tech goes to Wyoming and loses in overtime as a 2-touchdown favorite, and Texas State pops up as a winner against Baylor. We like to be a little smarter than the surface narrative and look a little bit deeper than that and see, okay, well, Texas Tech, they played a pretty damn good ball game against Oregon. The Ducks are getting a ton of respect across the nation, and if you watch that game, it came within like a toenail interception in the end zone is going Texas Tech's way. And we could go through a lot of other results. Baylor takes a good Utah team to the wire, should have won the game, outplayed Utah, and so forth and so on. So all that said, how good is this conference compared to what you thought it would be?
I think it's a little bit worse than I thought it would be. I mean, it's down year for sure. And that's why I think, the Texas Oklahoma, like this year, it's going to end up, I think, looking like they're going to stick it to the league on the way out. But if you look at the last few years, Mark, it really has been rotation, right? Think about what happened the last 3 seasons. They've had 6 different teams play for the Big 12 title, and 5 of those teams, like the next year, Iowa State in 2021, I think won 7 games, right? Oklahoma had a nice 2021, but they did not make the Big 12 championship game again. And you look back in 2022. Following Baylor and Oklahoma State making the championship, and they both won, 6, 7, and 5, right? And then so you're seeing this year TCU's off to a rough start. K-State, I think they're very, 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 very good. I think the Missouri game was one of those where they played a good team on the road and got beat by a long kick. And I wouldn't say I'm not going to take too much away from K-State. They're not as good as they were last year, maybe, but I think it's still a damn good football team. So yeah, I think the rotation part of it kind of tells you like it's somebody else's turn, and it makes sense that 2 talented teams in Texas and OU would kind of take that step up. I would say the middle class is not as good as I thought it would be. And maybe even the top part of the league, like Texas looks like they are the genuine article. Oklahoma could be really good. I still think once again, K-State's like I think they're probably top 20, top 15. But like who's the 4th best team? Is it West Virginia? Right. And then as wonderful as the story is, like, I don't know how good, the team is as a whole. It should be TCU's talented enough to be the 4th best team. Oklahoma State's a disaster right now. BYU's not that good, but they're 4-1. Like the numbers. I mean, if you look at some of the box scores in the games, like they don't move the ball very well a lot of the time. They don't move it consistently, but they are very, very opportunistic. So there's some interesting teams. I would just say, like, I don't think the league is as good. Maybe as last year would be a good way to say, but like the middle class last year was just so strong, such a strong middle class last year. And I don't feel the same way about this year's middle class as I did about last year's middle class of the league.
Yeah, BYU had that ultimate example of what you're talking about Saturday night against Cincinnati, where play differential first half was 50-20. 50-20. Late in the game, it was like 85-40. Yeah, just one of those crazy games where they had everything go their way and their yardage counted, where Cincinnati had wasted yardage, which brings me to, obviously, those are two newbies playing each other. So somebody had to win that game. But the other newbies losing the games, mostly staying fairly competitive. UCF blows a historic lead against Baylor. Fun one there, 36-35 after 35-7 in the fourth quarter. So the newbies are 0-6 against everyone. Do you think that's just a matter of matchups and it's still too early to tell, or is that just truly going to be the bottom of the league?
There's always going to be some growing pains. I think the thing is, like, for Cincinnati was not uncompetitive against OU, but Emory Jones is just not good enough. Like, it's just not going to get you where you want to go. And look, they hammered Pitt, and I was actually pretty surprised that game ends up being close in the end, but like, they were taking it to Pitt up front. But Pitt is terrible this year, it turns out. And they lost the next game to Miami of Ohio. I think UCF's pretty good. I think they just lost focus. I think they really lost focus. I mean, you watch the way that game went down. Like, they completely lost focus in that game. There's no excuse for the way it happened. And, they need some things to really go wrong for them. And they were not locked in, but that's what this league is. Like, there's just guys that can take advantage of mistakes, and the teams are too good. And I think it's the one thing that we always knew would happen. Like, learning to win in this league was always going to be an uphill climb. That was the challenge, because as opposed to ECU, followed by Tulane, followed by Navy, followed by whoever, SMU, whatever, it is now Oklahoma State, and it is now West Virginia, and it is now Kansas. And like, these are programs that aren't always good, but like they're West Virginia should be bad, but they're playing really well. And Kansas has been terrible for a long time, but they've been playing really well too, so that's kind of the challenge now, is like learning how to navigate that in a week by week basis. I think you're going to see that happen. Good for BYU so far. But once again, BYU's wins, I mean, actually they beat Arkansas, who's, a SEC team. But they lost to Kansas, and then they routed against Cincinnati, but Cincinnati's also a new team. So you're kind of seeing, like, it is a week to week struggle. It is a different matchup every single week. And I think these schools are having problems with the consistency, which I think was natural.
Josh Neighbors here. Neighborhood Watch. I get that. I think everybody gets that. Neighborhood Watch. You can catch it right here on YouTube. Anywhere else, Josh?
At Josh Neighbors _, at NWPod365 is where you guys can find it. It's YouTube, yeah, and then we're also wherever you get your podcasts.
Nice. Check Josh out. Great stuff, smart stuff. So track him. Big 12, national look, everything involved there. Kansas State, we'll get back to them. You mentioned the 61-yard field goal that spelled a loss at Mizzou. Kansas State's kind of off the radar, as they typically are, especially since they were off last week off the field. And then, besides that Mizzou game, which everybody gravitated nationally to that 61-yard kick to win a game, SEC record kick. Everybody's looking for somebody to challenge Texas. Kansas was an interesting look because of the dynamic offense, dynamic quarterback who didn't play, Jason Bean, who's been around forever. Getting the start for KU, and they somehow stayed in the game on the scoreboard for a while, but man, they were getting bludgeoned up front, both sides of the ball. So Kansas State, we can never underestimate Chris Kleiman. Do you think they've got a puncher's chance in this one to get into the championship game?
Oh yeah. I still believe they're the second best team in the league. I know the performance last week, OU against Iowa State, was eye popping, but they did not look excellent in their games, against SMU, and then the next one against Cincinnati, right? I mean, they distanced themselves from SMU in the end of that game, and Cincinnati had chances to make that game close, and Oklahoma had chances to pull away, and neither of them took advantage, and that's why the game ended up being 20-6, which was not a very good football game. Better from them this week, obviously, and I think Dylan Gabriel is, I think he feels the heat behind him. I think he knows there's a special talent in Jackson Arnold sitting right there. If things don't go, the way they need to, it's gonna be bad. But they've got Red River this week, so we'll see what happens there. But K-State, I think K-State, because of the coach and because they have a lot of the offensive line returning, they got the running game going last week against UCF. That was a big emphasis point for them. And if Will Howard's back to full health, like they're gonna be an extremely tough team to put away. He has gotten a lot better, and you can tell he is the best player in that offense this year. Skill player, I mean. I look, in that Missouri game, he was having to throw a lot of balls in some tight windows because the receivers were not getting separation. But he's willing to take those risks, and he can spread the ball all over the field. And so I like their offense. And Daniel Green on defense, losing him in the middle was really tough for them. But so they do have playmakers at all three levels. So just consistency for them is a big thing. But they've got the team to do it. They definitely have the team to do it, in my opinion. And I think I'll give Chris Kleiman the benefit of the doubt because they have retained so much of last year's team. They do have the quarterback back. And remember too, like they didn't, when Will Howard was playing, they didn't lose many games. Will Howard gets hurt against TCU. He didn't play in the Texas game. He didn't play in that Tulane game either. So some of their losses last year, say the Alabama game, he was not the guy. He's not done a lot of losing. And you don't watch the games that he's played in, and he's not the reason why they're losing in the losses. So I'm a big fan of his. I'm a big fan of Colin Klein. I think it's a future head coach we're talking about there. And I like the way they attack and do things at K-State. And I even like them getting the backup Avery Johnson in because I think that he can move the rock with his legs. So I like actually seeing him out there as well. So I'm still pretty high on them. And until Oklahoma, like Brent Venables is going to have to show me. And I'm not even saying I got to beat Texas this week, but you got to show me a little something just because they got handled by Texas. And the problem for me about the game, Mark, going back to that was that was a game where Dylan Gabriel did not come in as a quarterback and they had no plan, right? Like they had no plan to try and be competitive in that game. They never even gave themselves a chance. And that's coaching, right? That is coaching because they had a week to prepare and it looks like they were just like resigned to the fact they weren't going to have a quarterback in that game and did some really weird things. And so for me on that front, I'm just thinking, I need to see more of it consistently, him improving as a coach. I think the defense is better, but the defense started off well last year and then was absolutely terrible. So this week's a good test for them. And until further notice, I still feel pretty good about K-State being the second best team in the league. Once again, Oklahoma's got a chance to prove me wrong.
Yeah, I am preaching the same thing about Brent Venables. We are 18 games into his tenure, and I'm still not quite certain because he seems like rock solid guy, organization, discipline, all that should equal
even with Jeff Levy with the whole Bryles thing, like you could tell he was not pleased about how that went down.
Yeah, he's a Nick Saban type, detailed.
Right.
We're going to be disciplined. We're going to be out condition the other team. We're going to do all the right things, and we will wear you down. And we may not have, all the toys on the outside to make it look pretty, but we're long term. We're going to be in the running for this thing. But I was just surprised as a defensive guru. I would think that you step into a situation. Sure, you don't have the players that you want on defense, but you are able to identify things and have a full off season to play to players' strengths, shore up the techniques, do those things to improve the defense as much as you can squeeze out of that talent, and you improve on defense. But they just went the other way and they were just horrific. As you mentioned, like 124th in yards per play last year. Now, the early sample this year is, well, they're dominating on defense.
A lot better.
Again, we'll see if they're going to play. Cincinnati, for as marginal as they are gaining a lot more yardage and points against other opponents. So that is a good sign there in particular. But Texas is just almost 700 yards against KU. They go to Alabama. Now we're seeing that Alabama's not vintage Alabama, but they're still a really good team. And for them to go on the road and win by 2 scores against 5-star talent, like this Texas team, it's setting up as Brett Yormark's worst nightmare in terms of these two making their way through to a Big 12 championship game. But it is almost inconceivable to think that Texas won't be there.
Yeah, this is the best team in the league. It is not close. Once again, Oklahoma has a chance to show something, but like through the first part of the season, Texas is decidedly better than everybody else is. And if you look at the when that game was at the 1-score game this week, if you look at the numbers in the third quarter, I tweeted it out. There was like doubled up in plays. It was staggering. And look, like teams play with their food. Georgia's playing with their food right now. They haven't covered a spread yet this year. And so people were upset, but I'll tell you this. Sark is a very good big game coach. We've seen it so far this year, right? What were the big games? People said, the Rice game didn't go well. Oh, well, guess what happened the next week? They beat Alabama on the road. They kind of messed around against Wyoming. Well, they went to Baylor the next week, which is a big game, and they took care of business. Even muffing 2 punts, they took care of business in that game. The KU game is wedged between the Oklahoma game and the Baylor game. Okay, how does that go? Oh, 1-score game in the third quarter. But then, Mark, you mentioned that advantage they have in the trenches took over, and that is something that that Steve Sarkisian spent a lot of time and effort in terms of recruiting. And he knew that was the area where they had to win, because that's not the area they've been winning. And people always say this, like, Texas always is a talented team. This team is much different. This is not like they're super talented. This is they've got good offensive line play. They've got one of the highest rated quarterbacks in recruiting history. They've got old receivers. They've got young receivers. They've got tight ends. They've got Jonathan Brooks. I mean, I know losing Bijan and Roschon hurts, but Jonathan Brooks had a couple cuts last week where I scratched my eyes and thought, okay, poor man's Bijan Robinson, still a rich man's a lot of running backs, right? And I'm not saying he's that kind of guy, but a really competent running back. And he is their guy in the backfield. And the offensive line's clearing massive holes for him. Ewers can spread the ball over the field. And I think he's just going to get better. He had a terrible interception last week. And he's gotten a lot better and can make a lot of throws, but had a really nice run last week for a touchdown as well. So you think about how many games he started, like he's not played that many games. He's getting better and improving it, because that's what guys do in college. They get older, they get better. And this kind of group is in a really good spot because they're pretty balanced on defense. They have guys who make plays at all 3 levels. They can run the football. They can throw the football. They can throw the football to all the parts of the field. They can use tight ends. Like, they can really do everything that you need. And I'm not saying they're elite at one area, but it does not feel like they're super limited in any area. And I think Sark has done a great job of managing that at this point. Now, when the pressure ramps up later on in the season, sure, let's see. But they're not playing an SEC schedule. The schedule is not challenging enough, I think, in my opinion, to really, really test them. That game against Tech could be hard depending on what Tech's like later in the year. But the good news for them is they get K-State at home, and that road game to TCU looks a lot easier than it did before. So this thing Texas should win at least 10 games. If they don't win 10 games, it is a massive, massive disappointment. And Steve Sarkisian should be fired, because that's how good this team is.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. We've been talking the same narrative when it comes to Texas football, that yes, they've always been talented, but that offensive line component is enormous. It's just most of the time the most important position unit on the field. You have to have an offensive line,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been for as well as they've recruited everywhere, and including offensive line, that's probably been a step below the other position units. Number one. Number two, they just haven't developed it. Then they usually have a really high recruited quarterback who hadn't been developed by the Charlie Strongs and the Tom Hermans. And now they've got a quarterback guy and an offensive guru who knows how to utilize all that talent. And it's just a whole different deal. I try not to let my predictions and the betting lines skew my thought process watching these games, because I'm just rooting for KU. The number one, the underdog in me that always roots for underdogs. Plus, I took KU in 16.5 points.
Which also, in your defense, we didn't know Jalen Daniels was not going to play. That was not known.
That didn't help, even though I think Jason Bean is one of the better backup quarterbacks in college football. He is a backup quarterback. And they had a scoop and score, and they had a 58-yard play that kept him at 20-14 in the third. But otherwise, play to play,
they had a missed field goal too, which was really because the big thing is, I mean, when you have a defense like that, you're essentially just playing red zone roulette. You're gonna. I mean, the drives. If you look at the drive lengths for Texas, they were deep in KU territory, and KU is just holding the field goals. They got a missed field goal. They get the interception. That's how they kept that thing close. But I want to ask you make a point about the quarterback thing. They had guys like Sam Ehlinger before. I like Sam Ehlinger. People love Sam Ehlinger, a good dude, good player, but they would run him a lot and his shoulder would get banged up and it affected the throwing. This is not that. Quinn Ewers is the talent. The guy is unbelievably talented. He's really good at these touch throws between the hash marks. There are not many guys who are putting the ball where he puts it down the middle of the field. Those are really difficult throws to do. And he's locked in and can make them and can spread the ball all over the place. He can run a little bit too. They just feel uniquely talented compared to the other teams. They're talented, sure. This team's just different. They're just different.
Josh, we're at that point in the season where we're starting to gather data points. And I try to remind everyone not to overreact, but we do get those data points in each week.
Mhm.
And some are extremely meaningful. Others are just, okay, well, you whipped up on a bad group of 5 team. Didn't really matter. But when it comes to this league in regards to, yes, the data points, I'll point to West Virginia, the biggest surprise in the league, voted by the media to be in last place. They're at 4-1. If you would have told me and showed me the wins off season, preseason, I would have been more impressed than I am because, like you mentioned, Pitt, this has been a strong ACC team. They're just awful. They're 0-4 against the Power Five, have not gotten like crushed, but have not been largely competitive in these games. Phil Jurkovic's a
Mhm.
mess, and they just don't have an offense. And so West Virginia, it's great what they're doing, but we need more data points. But them going to TCU as a double-digit underdog on the road, that's a little more meaningful to me.
I talked about this because I picked them on like last or near last, whatever it was. And I talked about this on my show this past week. Neil Brown is like this really wonderful example of self-belief. Because and players deserve a lot of credit because they're the ones playing the game. But Neil Brown should have been fired and his job was saved because of an odd financial situation at West Virginia. They're getting a new athletic director. He got a bad contract extension too. Like all of these factors conspired together to help Neil Brown keep his job. And this thing could have gone a couple ways. He's recruiting once again. He's recruiting really well for a guy that is kind of had a dead man walking feel to him before. And Mark, I went so far as to say, like, I thought he had to coach himself back on to the hot seat. That's how poor I thought the performances have been, just because at schools like this, you need to find identities. I grew up in Virginia. I'm a Virginia Tech fan. Went to those games growing up. You know this too. Beamer ball, right? Special teams, defense, and then the quarterbacks. The quarterback play. They have a Mike Vick, Marcus Vick, Sean Glennon. He was kind of the outlier, but Logan Thomas's and Tyrod Taylor's, Gerard Evans. They had all these really, the guys who could do dual threat guys who could make big plays, and that was kind of the identity of Virginia Tech football. Special teams and some explosive plays and defense. And West Virginia has not had that under Neil Brown. And if they have, they've had it in fits and starts, and it's not consistent. This group has a very distinct identity. They run the football really well. They have a quarterback who can make electric plays with his feet. Not a great passer, but make electric plays with his feet. They've got a defense that does a fantastic job, I think, for the most part. Of last week, they had a couple explosive plays against them, but they tackle pretty well. They hit, and they hit, and they hit. And they're a little bit. They're a lot tougher than everybody they've played so far. Like Penn State's tough, but they were giving Penn State problems. Penn State could not really pull away, and that effort from West Virginia was very strong to me. I said, okay, I have something here. That Pitt game you mentioned, Pitt's not very good, but West Virginia was like, it's not a good roster, but they were losing players left and right, and it's next man up. And Nico Markel's a quarterback last week, plays a really terrible game, to be honest, against Texas Tech, but they won the game. They grinded the game out. They got to stop in the red zone to win the game. And this week, they needed, this is not a team that's built to come from behind. They came from behind. They blocking kicks, getting stops, not allowing, just the secondary played really, really well. They caused a lot of pressure. And I'm so blown away. And this is why, we talk about stuff at the top, Texas and Oklahoma, and we talk about Georgia and Alabama. Like a story like West Virginia this year, like this is what college football is all about. This is that human side of it, where it's a guy, Neil Brown, that we all basically told him he was fired, and he's lucky he's getting the job. And he made a group of guys who everybody counted out. They all believe in him. They all believe in each other pretty clearly too. And it's a really special thing when you get to see this. And I don't know where it ends. I don't know where it goes, but I think like right now, this is one of those stories where I feel like we should really appreciate this, because I think it's cool to see we be wrong in a profound way. That's going to, it's made a lot of the fan base deserves to be happy. And this team, they're not fun to watch, but they're really fun to watch, if that makes sense. The way they play is not aesthetically pleasing, but They're scheming up ways to run the football. Neil Brown said, I'm calling the plays. I'm going to go out on my sword. And it's fun. It's really fun story.
When I was posing the question, you delivered the answer in the same framework, but better than I would have in regards to, yes, this West Virginia story. I hope people aren't missing this story and others like it across college football, super hyper focused about, the teams that you mentioned in Ohio State and Michigan. And that seems to be all we hear, at least on my channel, is everybody wants to talk about 4 or 5 teams all the time, which hopefully, for the good of the sport, it's maybe more like a dozen teams this year that could win a national championship, with USC, Florida State, others possibly being that good, and maybe not just 4 or 5 teams. But this, West Virginia, this is what, and going forward, I know we had you on a couple of times talking about the future of the Big 12, and with the additions that do not look like elite programs, have never been that, but just provide depth, provide possible good programs. Arizona State's not that right now, but they've been that. Arizona's been that. Utah is that now. And Colorado obviously brings a whole different dynamic now that could be a whole lot of fun. And really, you talk about, let's take it in that direction. Colorado next year, and we're starting to see the reality, but still what they have done and what Deion's done and his staff is remarkable. 68 transfers, 20 new freshmen, that's 88 new players. You throw them together. This isn't basketball. It's a complicated sport. You're throwing all these guys together to play for the first time, and what they've accomplished, and to hang with USC. And I know that the score was somewhat misleading, but still it's remarkable. And this is only going to, his popularity, his draw, his charisma. And Josh, before I hand it to you, the thing that impressed me the most watching them against TCU was, I hadn't seen Travis Hunter before. I knew that he was ultra talented, so I got to see him for a full game, and I'm like, wow, yeah, as good as advertised. Shadur Sanders, all the speed and space and all that didn't surprise me. I knew that they had talent in pockets, but to see that Deion threw this team together, and they were, I know the defense isn't good, but they didn't blow coverages. They didn't commit penalties.
Yeah, it's a talent deficient issue. That's
Like they pulled this together and buttoned it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, man. He's actually a very good coach. Like, you can already tell, like, he, at least he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he got, like, you get Sean Lewis to come call your plays for you. A guy that I think a lot of people thought, like, it's an eventual Power 5 head coach, and then maybe he thought that's probably the shorter route to do it, just because being a MAC head coach right now is not fun. Schools come in and just raid your players every year. It's really impossible to be, continually good MAC teams. That's why there's so much turnover. But I think, like, you could tell, like, last week he was quiet, right? Like, if you were to tell Deion, okay, which of these 2 games you have a better shot in, the USC game, I think, is the one that we'd all agree, and I think he'd agree they had a better shot at. So that week of practice, you did not hear a lot of Deion talking. I think he knew about, like, what was going to happen. That USC game, they had a chance. They didn't quit. Also, too, I will say this, like, he talks about Travis Hunter and Shadur being kind of his, some of his kids in some ways. Those 2 guys are very, very impressive in terms of people. Travis Hunter, like, making the video with the guy that lit him up, right? And I thought his attitude about it, the kid sitting there wearing his giraffe onesie, and I think he's like, hey man, life's good. I'm sitting here doing my giraffe onesie, making some money, talking to you about playing the game I love, but it's a violent game, and saying, hey, it's football. And his son, he is tough. Does he hang on the ball too long? Yes, he does. Is he the best? Is he the most athletic quarterback in the world? No, he is not. Is he an excellent runner? Can he move around as much? No, there's a lot of other guys I'd take, but he wants to hang in there. He wants to make a play for his team. He will take the hits. That's a tough son of a gun. And that is him probably being coached from a very young age. I think that is the one thing, if you're a Colorado fan, like, as the roster gets better and as more of Deion's kind of, like, the mental DNA, I guess, gets in there, I think that's what's interesting. And that's going to be the challenge for them this year, because he's going to have to, sell them in the long game. Like, they're going to have to keep this thing together. I kind of liken them to last year's KU team, just because they've had so many new players and they do not have depth, especially on defense. I mean, the front line's not good. Like, what do you think the backups are like? Now, I know Cormani McLean is 5-star and not really playing a whole lot, but, like, depth-wise, it's not generally speaking a pretty good team. So what does that look like? That's why KU started off really hot last year. And then as they got injured, the backups when you're trying to build a program up are not that good normally. And so that's his challenge, is to build this thing up. And so I'm excited to see how they handle that challenge and they get through a season. In the Pac-12, it's not always the most physical conference in the world, but it's a really hard conference to play in because of how good the teams in the competition are, right? And so I think that's what I'm excited to see. But there's a reason why Deion impressed in all the interviews he did. He did interviewed with Arkansas. He interviewed at TCU before Sonny Dykes got the job, and everybody said he knocked it out of the park. Like, this dude, as for much the flash, whatever, and I'm bringing my Louis and stuff, the guy knows ball. Like, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's incredibly competent. And I don't know if folks thought that was going to happen. I thought Deion always knew too. I just didn't expect them to be like, he knows what he has and what he doesn't have. And that's really important. Like, knowing your personnel and knowing what you can and can't do is really important. I think he's actually done a pretty good job with that. And so I think that's the part that we're not talking about. And that's kind of like the really impressive part.
Cormani McClain came into that USC game and he immediately had a pass break up in the end zone that was like, and I know that I don't know the details, but I know that he's had off the field issues, just maturity issues, showing up at meetings, doing the right things. And Deion staying with him, probably bringing him along, but also putting him in his place to say, hey, until you do the right things, you're going to see limited action. But he immediately, they throw a slant at him, and you're talking the best quarterback in the country and you're talking a top wide receiver room, and he plays it textbook perfect to the hilt, like, doesn't interfere, bats,
right,
swipes it out of the receiver's hands. And he actually, in watching that game, without their two best defensive backs, Shiloh Sanders, Travis Hunter, they got torched in the first half. And then it's almost like they had the greatest defensive back in history as a head coach. Like, he's teaching these guys. You can almost just see it on the field that their defensive backs play well because he's the coach. It's pretty remarkable to watch.
Yeah, it is. And you could tell too, like there was if you can't stop the run, coaches know this, like, you have to basically just pack it up and go home, right? Like, if like a team is just going to be able to, like Oregon too, like Oregon's the good example. Oregon just ran it right at him. Like, that game was going to be one-way traffic. Deion knew that. This game was a little bit different. I know Marshawn Lloyd. I know this team's been pretty good at running the football. USC has, but like Caleb Williams freelancing is their best offense. And I think he knew they had a better chance to get some stops, and they did. And sometimes risk versus reward is kind of the way you have to play it. And they got some stops and made that game, somewhat competitive. No, did they ever have the ball and a chance to take the lead or tie the game? No, they did not. But, this team is, I know the results are going to continually kind of get worse in some ways, but I think the program is in really good shape, because I think beyond the attention, like, he's incredibly competent. He just knows what he's doing. He's going to be a good football coach. You can tell.
And Josh, so we've got the possibilities of Oregon State and Washington State, and you talk about Texas, Oklahoma as a possible Big 12 championship. I am actively rooting for Wazoo and Oregon State to show up for the Pac-12 championship game. Most likely not going to happen, but that's my rooting interest right now for obvious reasons. So will they eventually land in the Big 12?
Yeah, so I want to talk about this because it's something that's been brought up to me a lot recently. There's no indication that they're going to join the league. They have a court case going on right now, and they're trying to get more money out of the Pac-12. And I think that just the one thing they want to do is maintain the name, maintain the Pac-12, just be able to kind of carry that forward and see if they can make something work, whatever. I don't know what their future is. The Big 12 has no interest in them. The Big 12 is not interested in adding them because the TV companies are not interested in adding them. TV runs this thing now. It's kind of the whole deal. This is the reason why that, Oregon and Washington went to the Big 10, but we heard all the Big 10 schools weren't on board. But hey, it's not them calling the shots. At the end of the day, it's television companies. And, it's kind of like everybody signs the dotted line where the TV companies want you to. If those two, it's never been reported once that another conference wants those two schools. The fact that people are talking about this, and I've seen some shows talking about it, it's not actually something that's been reported. I don't report on my show. I follow folks like Dennis Dodd. I follow folks like Brett McMurphy, Pete Thamel, Nicole Auerbach. Ross Dellinger, those people I trust. And because those people have been in the industry, I've worked a lot of them. They cultivate, in different capacities, but they cultivate ratings, sources, excuse me. And there is no indication that those two schools are going to be joining. And the idea that somehow these schools are going to get all the money owed to Pac-12 schools, and they're going to, like their rich uncle's going to die and leave all the money to them, it seems nearly impossible to me, because I don't know how the court would be like, well, you know what? We're going to short all of these athletic departments this money that they thought they were going to get. It would be a disaster for all those schools. And that's not how it's, and they're in the Pac-12 still, those other schools. So I just don't understand how that would work out. And I feel bad for them, because I feel like everybody should have a place in this new college football world. And I'm worried about the future of the Big 12, because I feel like we're heading towards a super league. But, the way it's been described to me by folks is that they're going to look more towards the ACC and see what happens there. And I don't think there's any rush for the Big 12 to get more schools. And look, guys, the one, folks listening, the one big advantage those schools would provide you is West Coast games and late time slots, but they already have that. They've got BYU, they've got Utah, they've got both Arizona schools in Colorado. So like they kind of have their bases covered with later games. Yeah, I wish, I would love to see them in the league, but the ratings, and you can say, oh, they do good ratings. Well, because it's the only game on late at night, sure, whatever. But these schools are not money makers. And I don't think the Big 12 has any ideas of adding them, and that's not been reported at all. So I think the idea of saying it is and saying it might happen and saying they've got all this money they'd bring along is not true. And I've seen that places. And I think folks need to go and make sure they read the right reporting, because that's what I do on my show. And I think folks need to make sure they do that as well.
Talking Big 12 here at the Voice of College Football for a couple hours this afternoon. Bring some friends in, talk college football with us. We got Josh Neighbors here. You see his Twitter handle right there, Neighborhood Watch, right here on YouTube and your favorite audio platform. Josh, I want to respect your time, so certainly let me know when you need to leave. Oklahoma State, 8-4 is pretty much what they do and have done under Mike Gundy. Then they pop up and they do what they did in 2021. But man, 2021 for that program seems like it was a decade ago. What is going on there?
Man, Mike Gundy. I respect the hell out of Mike Gundy. He messed up pretty badly. Spencer Sanders is currently the backup quarterback at Ole Miss. And last week, Alan Bowman started a game for Oklahoma State, and it was not very good. It's some moments, but like they were rotating 3 quarterbacks in the beginning of the season. It didn't look great against UCA, it's in Central Arkansas. It did not look very good against Arizona State, although they won the game. They got hammered by South Alabama at home. They're still rotating quarterbacks. And then, they get in a shootout with Iowa State. Iowa State woke up, and I think for them, if you're trying to figure out where this program's going to go, Alan Bowman might help you win some games now. But if you're Mike Gundy, you're trying to build this thing, right? Like you have you don't need to win, because your job is pretty safe. So I would see if Garrett Rangel is the guy that can get you there. Because out of the 3 quarterbacks, he's the younger guy with the most eligibility left. And, it was a 3-star guy. And just see if you have something there, or at least get some experience under his belt, and then get a different guy in there next year and let him battle it out. But the way it sounded, Mark, is that Spencer Sanders wanted to be back. He wanted to be on Oklahoma State. And Mike Gundy told him 8 days into bowl practice, we've moved on. Incredibly short-sighted to do. Especially for a kid, Mark, that gave them 4 awesome years. I thought Spencer earned the right he gave them a full career. He just had the 1 year of extra eligibility. He gave them a full career. And I thought he earned the right to be able to say, Mike, I think I made a mistake. I'd like to come back. Coach Gundy, I'd like to come back. And I don't think Oklahoma State personnel wise was in a place to turn him down. And it turns out they weren't. And they are paying the price for it right now. They do not have a leader. They do not have somebody clearly in charge of that. And the way of, I used to work with Gabe Eichert, who played center at Oklahoma, was All-American, all 3-time All Big 12. He said it's really important in the locker room to have that. He said guys need to know who they're following. And honestly, you can win games. K-State did it last year with rotating, but they played the weird part of their season was when they played Adrian Martinez against Texas. And he was good in that game, but he made some mistakes. And it's like, why? We know Will Howard should be the guy. We know he should. Why would you do that? And so to me, it just hasn't made sense. Like Mike Gundy's been around long enough to know, like, you need a guy. And look, you just got to try one, like, having the middle reliever and the closer and flipping those boys around is not the way to play this thing. So I think Mike Gundy, which is, it's rare for him, I think he's mismanaged this quarterback situation. I think it goes back to last year. I think he's paying the price for it now.
And do you think that's the only thing wrong with this program?
No.
Significantly wrong?
Like the issue I have is that coaches can do things their way. That is fine, but you need to be more open to it, like to adapting. And Mike's always had a little bit of a challenge with, he's a little prickly. You know what I mean? I think we'd all kind of agree he's a little prickly. And I think he's a great personality, but we're seeing in basketball too, like these coaches are having a tougher time kind of dealing with the new era of college football. You need to keep some of these kids happy. Look, some of these kids you can't make happy. That's how it works. But that's what I'm kind of saying with, like, I think Spencer's a great example, right? I would never question that kid's toughness. He played a bunch of games hurt, and his mental toughness too. That's a guy who made a lot of mistakes in a lot of big games, but always came back. And he was the most important player on their team last year. And you saw how bad their offense got when he was injured or out. And so it's pretty apparent, like, that's somebody that probably didn't want to have everything fall on his shoulders. And so that's why he wanted to go somewhere else. And he's like, you know what, maybe returning is the best thing for me. You need to be able to give a little bit. You need to be able to give and take a little bit. And I think Mike Gundy has earned the right to do things his way, but we're going to have to come at you, man, if it's not working. And I think it bothers me, Mark, because the one thing he did really well in 2021 was he adapted that roster to what that roster was good at. Mike Gundy, you think about throwing the ball over the yard, you think about, the quarterbacks, Clint Shelf and Zach Robinson and, all of the quarterbacks they've had and the wide receivers. That team ran the football, played defense, and had Spencer Sanders make some throws they needed to. And I was like, Mike Gundy, this is not you, but the fact that you adapted it shows how good of a coach you are. And I think he needs a little bit of that when it comes to managing personalities. And I don't think he has that right now, managing people. And so that's what I think the issue is for Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State.
We've gotten to a place the last few years, Josh, in college football where, as bad as things would get at one point, it was rare for a coach to be fired after 4 or 5 weeks. Now, we haven't seen that this year. We had a rash of it last season. There were like 5 or 6 coaches let go by week 5.
Right.
We talked about Neil Brown. He's coached himself off that hot seat for now. And when you look at the schedule, and this could be said, I know, for about just every Big 12 team, but while everybody could jump up and beat them, they're certainly not world beaters themselves. West Virginia, they could be like 8-1 when they show up at Oklahoma later this season. But the only coaches that come to mind, Dave Aranda, certainly it helped to come back from 4 touchdowns down this past weekend, but
right.
Not an overall good look for him. And I had somebody else in mind that I'm lost now.
Dana Holgorsen.
Dana Holgorsen. That's who I had in mind. Exactly. Yes. As the possible candidates. Yeah.
Yeah. He's cooked. Holgorsen's done. I mean, they're just not consistent enough. And even you saw it in the game last week, and he started off the year really well, a really tough, difficult win against UTSA. We're getting throttled by Rice for a lot of the game. We're able to come back and rally. And they even said we didn't respect the opponent enough. That cannot happen. And for Dana, like, it's just been happening too often. I think Houston's got a chance to be a really good program because of where they're located now, being in a power conference, but they need to find some new leadership because it's not going well. It's not going well. And this roster is not that good. And they might give him one more year because he's had some experience in the Big 12. So I have to fly in my apartment. They might give him one more year, but I think he's cooked. And the Aranda one's a tough one because you've been to a Big 12 championship game and you've won a Big 12 championship game. You won a New Year's Six Bowl. And the thing about Baylor is too, like, you look at Baylor's last 15 years, 3 separate coaches have won at least 10 games. Art Briles did it. Matt Rule did it. Dave Aranda did it. It's a place where you can win. I just think, they They need to find somebody they can keep and they can find somebody consistent. I know it should be a little bit easier for them because like they got a lot of money and they're in Texas. But yeah, it's just I think also his personality has hurt him at times. I actually like him for his personality, but he's so mild mannered, he's so soft spoken, and it just feels like I guess they got a spark this week, but like it just kind of happened, and I don't know if it's something he said, but it felt like they were missing that. And they finally got it once. I'm just wondering how long they sustained that for. So the folks at the 365 network that I work for, like they're the best people to talk about Baylor with, and they know better than I, but the way they've told me, man, he's going to get every single chance to keep that job. And he should.
Josh, before we let you go, beyond the Red River rivalry, which is obviously going to gain all sorts of attention and should for various reasons, plus 2023. And this is the last time those two get together, which is going to be kind of eerie, or get together as Big 12 foes.
Right.
Well, what else are you looking out for this rest of the season? Is there a particular game or a handful of games, or just kind of a development of a certain offense or defensive unit, or what's out there that could factor into this conference race that maybe some people aren't thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I'm wondering, like, is there a fourth team that makes a push to be in the championship game? And I mean, a legitimate push to be there. Oklahoma's got a chance because the way the league is. K-State's got a chance because we know they've got a lot of the roster back, and they've just did it last year. And Texas obviously does too. I don't think at this point in time there's any fourth team you can nominate and say that that team deserves to have a chance, because as well as West Virginia plays and as schedule sets up, the issue for them is they play the low scoring games. They want to play low possession games, and they're not a really efficient offense. So like you're going to be in some low scoring games where you might get tripped up and caught, right? That's kind of the issue if you're not, because I don't know, like I don't think they're going to throttle anybody. I don't think that's the way the team's built. So I'm wondering who that fourth team is. Kansas could have a chance, but I think, if you push them around, you can push them around. And that's kind of, we haven't seen them hold up for a full season. I mean, they lost 6 of the last 7 games last year. So like, I kind of need to see that happen first before I say Kansas is a Big 12 title contender. And also and as good as Jason Bean is, that offense is at its best with Jalen Daniels, and we don't know if he's okay. So that's where I'm at with KU. And TCU, I mean, they've got the talent too, but just something's off about that group right now. Something's a little bit off, and I think we have to figure out what that is. So I'm wondering if there is a fourth team. I mean, there's a chance there's not, but the fact that we're only on October 2nd, it's like, all right, I feel pretty confident saying it's a 3-horse race. That tells you something. I mean, look at the ACC, right? I mean, Clemson's kind of out of it, but like Louisville's still there. FSU is there. North Carolina is right there. Florida State obviously is right there. So they've got all of these schools. Duke is right there. Riley Leonard's injury obviously was standing, but look at the SEC West. Like, who the hell's going to win the SEC West this year? I mean, we got no idea, right? You kind of assume Georgia's win the East, but I mean, A&M, Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss could all win the West. And the Pac-12, we got a bunch of schools too that feel like it. I mean, I feel like the Big 12 is a conference where we only have 3 teams that we know of that could do it. You think about the Big 10 too, like another power conference. 3 in the West, or 3 in the East, rather. Those big 3. And in the West, who the hell knows who can win that too? So it feels like the Big 12 is kind of like really solved, and it's just a matter of, are there upsets along the way that kind of dictate who is in there out of those 3 schools, not like, is there a fourth that gets involved?
You talk to Big 12 fans every day. Most people align with their conference eventually, even though they hate their rivals. Then they pull through with, okay, well, I want to be represented in the playoff. I want my league to look good in the bowl season, etc. But it's a different dynamic this year. So it's Texas. The Big 12 fans that you talk to, will they root for Texas and or Oklahoma to get through and go to a playoff, or just say, you know what, let's just stay out of it this year because I don't want to see those teams succeed?
I don't think they want to, but like I would, like, I want them, like, if I'm a fan of Kansas State, I want my school to have the money. You know what I mean? Like, it's more money for you. And so, also, like, in the end, if they win, what does it actually mean? Like, what does it really mean? Like, if Texas keeps winning, like, they played a Big 12 schedule. They might be recruiting the SEC, but like they're in the Big 12. They're playing Big 12 schedule. And also, it's not like they've been hammering the league for years and years. Like this is a Texas team that has not made the Big 12 title game since I was in college. I'm 26 now, so that wasn't too long ago, but it was 2018, I think it was, so yeah, I mean, it's almost natural that they should. Like, it's not like, Texas has always been running this league. No, it's been Oklahoma. It's run it recently. And most recently it's been a mixture of teams. It's been competitive. So to me, like, if you just think that Texas and Oklahoma have run this league forever and ever, and especially recently, like that would not be the case. If you looked at what's happened in recent memory, are they usually more talented for the most part? Yeah, but they have not, in terms of being a team, been better. So I would want to see them. Yeah, if they get there, I mean, go ahead and win the thing. I like Sark too. I like Sark a lot. So I'm just hoping for his sake, able to keep his job and whatnot. But I will say this, like, I thought that the trash talking between Brett Yormark and Texas, like, I think it's a pretty interesting storyline. And I like the idea of Texas being this top dog and everybody wants to pick them off during the year. I think it's pretty compelling. I would love to see that.
Absolutely. Josh Neighbors, Neighborhood Watch. It's on YouTube and it's also on your favorite audio platform. Josh, thank you so much for stopping by, giving us some great stuff.
Yep. Anytime, Mark. Thank you so much.
Again, Josh Neighbors, you can catch him right here on YouTube, Neighborhood Watch, and audio platforms all over the place as well. We will continue to talk Big 12 football with all of you throughout the afternoon here at the Voice of College Football. Check out some of our recent content as well. Late last night, I released a video, Bottom 10. It's just kind of a fun look at not necessarily the 10 worst teams in the country, but you'll just have to check it out. Some interesting angles on who's just gone belly up across college football. Not necessarily teams, but various storylines, narratives, units across college football. Bottom 10, check out the video. Also, I'm going to be posting the link in the chat. We're talking Big 12 football. Guess what? We've launched a new Big 12 channel. We would love all of you to take part. Check out the content. Please subscribe. And if you enjoy and support what we do here at the Voice of College Football collectively, even if you could care less about the Big 12, even if you're an Oklahoma or Texas fan who says, you know what, I'm not going to be around, we're going to be in the SEC. Well, we got an SEC channel we just launched about a month ago as well. And also just consider to support the channel and what we do collectively here at the Voice of College Football. Subscribe to everything, but especially our Big 12 and SEC channels. We will drop the links in the chat. We just barely touched on Oklahoma State with Josh Neighbors, but we're going to take a deep dive right now. We got Cody Stovall jumping in here with us. We appreciate it. No. We got Big 12 Mafia.
How you doing,
Cody's
Mark?
coming in at 2:00 Eastern, folks. We got Nathan Brown stopping by. Nathan, we appreciate you being here, man.
I appreciate the invite. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. Good to see you as well. We are dedicating the afternoon to the Big 12, so near and dear to your heart, or
Absolutely.
at least what your heart has become here in the last year.
That's
with
right.
the Big 12.
That's
You guys pulled out a game, Nathan, on Saturday night that all of us were looking at. I go live after the primetime game, so that one drifted off, obviously, deeper than that, but I had my eye on it and was amazed at the statistical layout of that game as it progressed, as Cincinnati, I believe, had a 50-20 play advantage in the first half, and that pretty much continued throughout the game, racked up the yardage, but BYU made the plays to win what was the first win for the new teams in the Big 12 in a conference game.
Right, and it very much mimicked the Arkansas game, right? Arkansas outgained them by 200 plus yards as well. But one thing that you got to take into consideration is, one, the team is a veteran team. There's if they're not all or juniors or seniors, they're older, right? Because of the demographics that the church lays out for the school with the missions and all that stuff. So this is a group that Doesn't matter if you get them down. Doesn't matter if they do get outgained and are on the field a little bit longer. They're very resilient, and I think that's going to really do them good in the Big 12 as the rest of this season goes along. I mean, how many people picked BYU to only win maybe 3 or 4 games this year? Right? They were really picked against in a lot of ways, and so I was at the game with my wife. It was exciting, and they should have won. They should have. That last touchdown in the end of the fourth quarter was unfortunate because it kind of changes the perception, right? And the eyeballs matter. So I've been around long enough to know that people do check scoreboards, and the final score means a lot to a lot of people. But at the end of the day, I was ecstatic that they got their first win, and I think Cincinnati's going to do better in the league than people might anticipate. They're a good team. They have a very good defense, and it's just a matter of time for all these newer schools to get caught up in the league.
Ironically, Keaton Slovis started his career on the same field, but playing for USC, and then he kicked around to Pitt, had a big year at USC with 30 touchdowns a few years ago, but he's been kind of kicked around and comes to BYU. The numbers look solid. What have been your expectations out of Keaton Slovis, and what has he shown you?
He needed to come in with a veteran leadership. That's exactly why he was the one quarterback that was their number one pursuit. There were other quarterbacks that were in the transfer portal over the holidays and into January, and he was their number one pick. Aaron Roderick went out of his way to court him right away, and he had John Beck is one of his QB gurus. He's been studying under him, and obviously John Beck played at BYU. Maybe 15 years ago now. And so he was definitely somebody that they were eyeing for a long time. They saw him when he was a freshman. Thankfully, they beat USC that day. But I think he's exactly what they needed, veteran leadership. If you watch the game, he doesn't have happy feet, right? He doesn't get really rattled at all. There was that one play, I'm not sure if you caught it, where there was a free rusher coming right up the field. Keaton's eyes were down the field, but he caught him at the last second and just did a very deft sidestep to the left, ended up throwing a touchdown strike to number 2. I'm spacing who that is, but at the end of the day, it was a great game, and he came in and has provided exactly what they needed, sort of a bridge to this new recruiting classes that they're bringing in with some really good quarterbacks that are looking good. And I think they've played well. I've been pretty excited. I think the Kansas game they frankly gave away with a couple of turnovers that turned into points. So they could win. I don't know. I'm still hoping that they win 7-8 games, but obviously the season's long and injuries will tell.
Well, I am just now checking out the schedules. So let's see who's coming up this week.
It's a bye this week, and then we have TCU and then Iowa State.
Gotcha. Yeah,
and
TCU,
then,
Texas Tech.
Sorry, Texas Tech. Yeah, Texas Tech is back in Provo. That's right. I apologize. Yeah, that's right. And TCU's a little down this year, so they could come out of Fort Worth and actually get a win. The one problem is they play better at night. They have for the last 4 years, they played much better at night. There's something like 26-3 after, I think, at 7 p.m. Mountain, which is 9 Eastern, and they play well when the lights are on. In the afternoon games, they seem to have struggled for some reason. So that's something Kalani's still working on.
Has somebody served that up to Kalani in the media to get a little feedback on why that might be and what he's going to do about it?
There's been questions, but I've never heard a good answer. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think part of it is the night games BYU has played consistently for the last 20 years because of the schedules they've had to play to be on TV, to be on national relevant television. It's needed to be those late games, and they're not afraid to play the late window stuff. The after dark thing, I think, is sort of a silly moniker, but when the lights are on, they tend to play much better. Baylor last year, this year with Cincinnati, and I can only hope. Unfortunately, the Texas Tech game, I just saw TCU games in the afternoon. I'm hoping the Texas Tech game at home the next week will be at night, but we'll have to see.
Nathan, in being a BYU fan, this is how I think I would perceive it. You're going to have to fill in the blanks then for me, because up until this year, not playing in a conference and it going all the way back to 1984 since there was a national championship. And then we could pick out a few years since then where there was some level of national championship aspiration late in the season that,
Right.
you're in this, okay, we just play from week to week and hope we have the best record we can possibly have, whether that's 9-3, 10-2, whatever that turns out to be,
Yeah.
and get to a decent bowl game. And there's no real tangible pursuit, whereas I know you're not eyeing a Big 12 championship this year, but you're now in the pursuit of a tangible championship. Does that make your just focus as a fan a little bit different, or will it going forward when you think this program's in a better position?
It's completely changed the dynamic in Provo. The
Okay.
entire, not only the players and the administration and the school, but every one of the fans. It was interesting after the Kansas lost. After we lost to Kansas in Lawrence, it would have been very easy to hang your head, right? That was a game that they really felt that they could have won, but it ended up being something that we came out of there going, well, for one thing, we earned respect from the Kansas fans. I think most Kansas people, if you'll talk to them, they've been very impressed with the way BYU has handled themselves in the game and afterwards. But more than that, it was, wow, we're still in this, right? This is just one game. We have 9 or 8 more of these things. And you're never out of it. It's the way Lavelle used to be. He always would preach, you win your conference, and then you could talk about where they're going to be relevant in the national scheme. And that we had lost that the last 12 years. It's like we've been wandering in the deserts. I tease with my kids. We've been the Israelites wandering out looking for the land of promise and haven't had it, because you lose one game and you're out of any conversation. And so it really has changed everything about the way that BYU is approaching these things. And certainly they're trying to represent the conference as good as they can.
With no connection to the Big 12 before the announcement was made, I don't know what level of interest you had, or attachment, or observation of the Big 12 than you would any other conference. And then suddenly, boom, this is your conference.
Right.
And you're coming from a different path, a different avenue than the other three
Right.
that had their rivalries and their connections. So now that you're in the league, what is your perception of Big 12 football, the rivalries, the connections, how good the league is, whether that's long term or this year? Your thoughts about the Big 12?
Well, the numbers would say the Big 12's down a little bit this year, but I've been watching them since since 2011 when TCU went. We had in Provo, there was a lot of people that had hoped they would get an invite, and instead that invitation went to West Virginia, which is great for them. They're certainly not looking down on that program, but BYU had hoped to have that invitation, and then as time went. Look, I was born in 1970. I was there in the early 80s when there was multiple conversations about why isn't BYU in the Pac-12, and it was getting obvious that that was never going to happen. I mean, they kept talking about it, and that was just never going to be. And so once Utah was taken instead of BYU, and the West Virginia invite went out instead of BYU for TCU, I think that it sort of flipped a switch. And I think looking towards more of the Big 12 as a conference moving from that point, it was pretty obvious that if there was going to be a move, it was going to be to the Big 12. And so I've been watching it with more intent since then. I think the programs that are in the Big 12 play really good football. I think we're getting away from the idea that the games are, through the teens, it's been, the no defense league, right? There was the 55 to 45s, TCUs and Oklahoma and Texas and Kansas State. And these games would just have it was like playing an arcade game. I think that's changing quite a bit now. And the teams, there's a lot more deliberateness to the way that they game plan. And BYU's biggest change, that the thing they've improved on the most this year, is their defense. And they're only in the games at Kansas, at Arkansas, and with Cincinnati even. because of the defense, and it's changed the dynamics. And now BYU doesn't have to go out and score 45 or 50 points to be in the game. And I think that the league in general, that's changed a little bit. Those times you could maybe turn around and say, except for Oklahoma State, sorry, instead of Oregon State and Utah, nobody plays defense in the Pac-12. I mean, Washington goes out to Arizona and almost loses. And holy cow, what happened with Colorado and USC, right? USC's up, what was it, 48-29, and then basically goes to sleep. And yet we're looking at the Pac-12 as one of the best conferences in the league this year, or in the country this year. So I think it's a different brand of football. I've been warning my Utah friends and the people I talk to, is like Wild Ute. I've been like, look, you need to take off the Pac-12 visors and really start watching, which he has. He's started watching Big 12 football, knowing that they're going to be in the league next year. And he's starting to get a different impression about how these teams are prepared. They're not just going to be rolling over and just expecting these new schools to come in and just beat them. And even if Texas and Oklahoma are gone, or when they're gone, I think next year you're going to have a more balanced upper end than people anticipated going into this season.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. It's the most balanced league in the country, with Texas separating themselves thus far. And most people would expect, I do as well, for that to continue. But you remove Texas and Oklahoma, wow, it's going to be a free for all. Add the four others. And, Colorado really provides kind of a wild card, because other than one guy, and we know who that guy is, they would just be another addition that's okay. Well, they could be a really bad program like they've been, or they could elevate and play better football like they have in their history. But now they've got a guy that, again, Deion Sanders is a complete wild card of what he might be able to make that thing, which this might be far-fetched, but maybe an elite program.
It's quite possible. I still don't think he's there longer than 4, maybe 5 years.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
And not because of anything that he would have done at Colorado, but because his popularity, obviously, the SEC and the Big Ten are looking at that program and saying, look, if you can bring 10 million viewers on a week to week, I mean, I think the Colorado State is really where everybody opened up their mind. Almost 10 million viewers, almost a complete 5 share, which are numbers that the NFL aspires to every week. It is shocking. It's really incredible the amount of difference he's made. And I think his daughter is a freshman or a redshirt freshman. So if you measure that out 4 or 5 years, I could see then, if they don't want to move because they want to leave her to program and support that number would pretty much come up about that time. And I could easily see him moving on to the SEC, or not the Big Ten as much, because that's not his recruiting ground. It's from Texas and the Southeast, obviously. But yeah, that's where I think. I mean, depending on what happens with Florida State in 5 years, that program, obviously, Billy Napier hasn't exactly had the greatest teams at Florida. And then there's always the quick trigger in a place like Texas. So we'll have to see, but certainly what they've done there has been impressive.
Real quick on the screen here, George says, Mark, can you make a video telling us how many teams are in each conference? Because they all have these names like Big 10, 12, Pac-10, Pac-12. I don't even know how many teams are in the conference.
Right.
So that's a quick answer, George. Basically, different leagues have made different determinations on why they're going to brand their league. So the Pac-12 is determined from way back. Whatever the number is, that's what we are. The Pac-8, then we became the Pac-10, then the Pac-12. The Big 10 decided we're a brand, so we could be the 37 teams, and we're always going to be the Big 10. So there you go.
And I think the Big 12 is going to do that as well. I don't think they're going to change from 12. I think they redoubled their efforts the last 2 years to really build the brand. Brett Yormark, that has been his number one job, is to make the brand supersede the region, which has always sort of been tied to the middle of the country and not a lot of population in those areas. And so he's trying to step out of that shadow and say, hey, look, we're much bigger than just whatever the name is, similar to the Big Ten.
We've got Nathan Brown here from Big 12 Mafia. You can catch him on YouTube. You can catch him on Twitter. You see the Twitter handle right there, and the Big 12 Mafia show on YouTube. So when do you typically go live, post videos? What do people need to know?
Normally we're Tuesday, Wednesday, and Fridays now with the season going. Once the season's over, we will, and probably in the bowl season, we'll go back to the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because Thursday night football will maybe start to come down a little bit. Certainly in the off season, that won't be an issue. And then Saturday games won't be there anymore. So we're trying to do 3 a week, but we've been doing every once in a while a special episode, so we'll do 4 a week. I got a great panel of people that I work with. The guys are awesome, and I think we've got a really good following. Both Mafia and the Holy Rivals, which is a BYU Utah Holy War rivalry show, and I do that with Wild Ute, and it's really impressive. I think it's just going to grow, like your show, right? I mean, how amazing is it, the reach that we can have to people that want more content that aren't getting it from a place like, well, I mean, I hate to say it, but the bias that is coming out in some of these broadcasters, ESPN stands out to me. The mistakes, the complete disaster that they're making of the Washington State, Oregon State thing. Look, these are people that I've been supporting since my show started, and I felt really bad for them. Boise State, San Diego State a little bit, but they sort of shot themselves in the foot with stuff. But it's frustrating, and so we're trying to give voice to some underprivileged, or not underprivileged, but underexposed fan bases.
All right, Nathan. Anything else before we let you go?
Yeah, look for a video tonight. Well, it might not come out tonight. We're going to be doing a special video series with a lawyer that is a friend of the Utes. I don't want to use his name quite yet, but that's going to be on the ACC and kind of what is going on, the drama there. So look for those videos this week. And then we have our next Big 12 Mafia show is tomorrow. I believe it'll probably be 8:30 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, and that'll be with me, Mo and Sports, Immaculate View, and the Wild Ute.
Excellent. Nathan Brown, Big 12 Mafia. We appreciate you stopping by, Nathan.
Thanks so much for the invitation at any time, and I'm going to have you on my show. I'm still going to hold you to that.
That sounds good. I'm
okay.
Here. You know where to find me.
All right, I do. You have a great day. We'll talk to you later.
You too, Nathan.
Okay, bye-bye.
Nathan Brown, Big 12 Mafia. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Let's keep in mind, everyone, Texas Tuesdays is what day is that? I'm going to have to look it up. Texas Tuesdays, anyone? Texas Tuesdays, what day? Okay, Texas Tuesdays on Tuesday with Matt, 7:30 Eastern Time. And that's on the Texas SG1 Sports channel. It's also on our new Big 12 channel, folks. We've got a Big 12 channel, and we know that we've got a broad audience here at the Voice of College Football, meaning that many of you root for, oh my goodness, I find this out in the videos that I produce. Some of them do well, some of them tank, just the way it is. I obviously produce videos that I enjoy, that I believe will do well, that are going to strike a nerve and be accepted, entertained, whatever the purpose, basically going to be engaging in some way with all of you. And again, we have representation for, we started to take a poll a couple of years ago to find out how many people that watch us root for various teams. I'm going to release that at some point, and we're going to start that back up. I'm going to start to get more responses from all of you to find out who you root for, so we can take an accurate, I would love to take an accurate, we've got almost subscribers. How many subscribers do we have? 42,000 something. 42,000 subscribers here on the main channel. Would love to know what the specific breakdown of team representation is. So we do our best to provide all of that for you each and every day here at the Voice of College Football. But for Texas Tuesdays, it's at 7:30 Eastern Time, again on our Big 12 channel that we launched about a month ago. We've left the link in the chat. The link is in the description section of every video. You can go right to the Big 12 channel. You can go right to the SEC channel. And again, if you root for those conferences or you are just a major college football fan and would like to lock in on SEC and Big 12 content, then there you go. If you are supporting what we do here at the Voice of College Football overall, then please subscribe to the Big 12 and the SEC channels. It helps the entire network. All right, Texas Tuesdays on Tuesdays at 7:30 Eastern Time. Let's see what else is Big 12 related. We've got an Oklahoma live stream that we do each and every Wednesday. That's at 12:30 Eastern every Wednesday, Oklahoma Live. That's on the Oklahoma SG1 Sports channel. We also simulcast that on, guess what? The Big 12 channel. The Big 12 channel. The link's in the description section of all the videos. Grab the Big 12 channel. Check it out. Please subscribe. We simulcast and we go live with our Oklahoma show on Wednesdays at 12:30 Eastern. We've got our Texas Tuesdays, as you see down below, at 7:30 Eastern on Tuesdays. We've got a West Virginia live show with our guys Ryan and Rush every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Anything else I'm missing? Post-game shows. West Virginia, Oklahoma, Texas from the Big 12. And, of course, this Red River rivalry game comes up at noon Eastern on Saturday. And we appreciate you checking out our instant analysis videos every Saturday. So what I do is I take what I believe to be the two biggest games at noon. And as soon as the games are over, we deliver our instant analysis on those games. Then 3:30 window, the same deal. Check out the two biggest games at 3:30, the most compelling games. Deliver our instant analysis. We do the same thing in prime time, which I typically can't get to two games. I get to one game, Notre Dame Duke, this past Saturday, because we're preparing for and then needing to launch our call-in show. Some of you not aware that we go live with all of you after the games on Saturday night, right about 11:30 Eastern Time. Take your calls, talk college football, wrap up the weekend, wrap up the big day in college football. Week 6 is coming up. Let's check out the Big 12 schedule in week 6. And our Amazon links in the description section of all the videos as well. In the Big 12 this weekend, we've got a Friday night matchup, which is rare from this conference. Kansas State, Oklahoma State on Friday night, ESPN 7:30 Eastern. Kansas State, as we talked with Josh Neighbors about, after Texas, it looks to be a free-for-all. Maybe Oklahoma is up to Texas, up to the challenge, up to being the number 2 or number 1 team in the league. If not, Kansas State might be that team. They did lose to Mizzou on a 61-yard walk-off field goal. But Kansas State otherwise has a win in the conference over UCF, and they've got Oklahoma State on the road. And we talked to the Cowboys a little bit. We've got Cody Stuball showing up here pretty soon to talk Oklahoma State football. Kansas State, OK State, that's a Friday night tilt. On Saturday, Red River at noon Eastern. We'll be all over that. UCF and Kansas show up at 4 p.m. Eastern. Then we've got Texas Tech and Baylor at 8 o'clock Eastern on ESPN2, TCU and Iowa State. That also a night game from Jack Trice Stadium. So Kansas has a shot at the Big 12 championship game. Well, everybody's got a shot at the Big 12 championship game. The worst you can be right now is 0-2. UCF 0-2, Houston 0-2. Somebody else out there is probably 0-2 in the league. But everybody's still got a shot, of course, to get to the championship game. But realistically, that Oklahoma-Texas game is basically going to determine, is Texas a million miles beyond everybody else in the Big 12, or is Oklahoma within range, or is Oklahoma possibly the best team in the Big 12 and we just didn't know it because they haven't played anyone yet? I believe Texas is decidedly the best team in this league. I said it during the offseason that on paper, Texas was not just the best team in the Big 12, but the best team in any conference with the biggest, largest gap over the rest of the league. And that's proving out right now. UCF's going to have to start to win some games to get to bowl eligibility. Kansas still has a shot despite its loss against Texas, in which they hung in there for about 2.5 quarters. They're at home against UCF. Difficult place for UCF to play, I would think. First ever match. I don't know if it's a first ever matchup, but I wouldn't be surprised. First ever matchup between those two schools. Texas Tech, Baylor. Baylor, that close to being 0-2 in the conference, pulls out the 36-35 win. If you're not aware, UCF led Baylor 35-7 in the fourth quarter and blew it. Texas Tech coming off a 21-point win over Houston. It was a close game throughout until Texas Tech blew them out in the fourth quarter. TCU at Iowa State. The Cyclones got on the board in the Big 12 last weekend with a win by a touchdown over Oklahoma State. TCU was upset at home as a 12-point favorite against West Virginia. Look out for the Mountaineers. They've got a bye week, and so at some point this week, we will be doing a massive West Virginia live stream to talk about 4-1, Neil Brown, hot seat at the beginning of the season. What's he doing different? Are they better? Are they truly better? Or just have they been fortunate to start the season at 4-1 against bad teams? And will they make a push in the next few weeks? I will have to correct this banner down below because Steve Merrill, our guy from Wager Talk, did the unthinkable this weekend. He missed a pick. Steve is now a lowly 16-2 against the spread. You get that exclusive at patreon.com/MarkRogersTV. Patreon.com/MarkRogersTV, or as a Voice of College Football YouTube member. So that's much easier to do considering where you are right now. Please join as a YouTube member here, and you get Steve's under the radar selection. He is 16-2 against the spread. I had a down week, but I'm still solidly, confidently in the green at about 59% against the spread this year. Christopher's here. West Virginia was rated 50th last week. George is here. Bobby Redwine, good to see you. So, Bobby, I've got to say that I've never seen your handle before here at the Voice of College Football. So it is tradition here for us to welcome you. So, Bobby Redwine. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Would love to know how long you've been watching and who you root for. West Virginia fan Scott here. Rob J. and others. Well, we do have some time before our next guest. We've got a few other guests going to stop by this afternoon. I've got to record with Steve Dace of Michigan Podcast coming up at 3:30 Eastern. So be looking out for that video with Steve Dace. That should be a great college football conversation. It always is. We've got the link showing up right now in the description section, or I'm sorry, it's in the chat. Please join the show if you would like. And there's the link. We are simulcasting on our Big 12 channel. So check out our Big 12 channel. The description section provides the link for the Big 12 channel, and please subscribe right there. And you can join the show as we have left the link right there. Bobby Redwine says that he's been an OU fan his entire life. Very cool. And been subbing for a long time. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that so much. All right, let's go to the phone lines here at the Voice of College Football. We've got our guy Christopher here. Chris, what's going on?
Mark?
Hi.
How are you?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
Well, I was interested to see you had that BYU person on there, and I don't really follow. To be in all fairness, I really don't follow BYU all that closely. But he said, I guess they posed a challenge to Kansas, even though I didn't catch the game. I don't know. Did you happen to catch it? I didn't.
I did not. I know they lost by 11.
Then Kansas, they got beat, I guess, pretty bad by Texas, didn't they? Is that kind of like the last game?
Yeah, they did.
Well, you included Kansas as in your. I'm not saying you're wrong to do it, but I don't know. I don't think I have Kansas rated all that high. I think after they lost, I mean, maybe before, if they hadn't gotten beaten, I guess maybe I might have them in the top 25. I know this isn't necessarily what you want to talk about, but what is it about Kansas that gives you the.
Talk about anything.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just curious. Is it because I haven't really seen them play, so I don't. Honestly, I'm just basing it on the record as far as how well they've done as a team. But is there a reason why you have them in your top 25 other than just the fact you like them, or?
Well, they are barely there. They're at number 25. Yeah. So this is what I like about Kansas is that, and again, so my situation with my rankings is that I do my very best to take out my bias and just rank these teams based on their resume. I am not saying, so for example, Texas is number 1 right now in my rankings, but that doesn't mean I believe they are the best team in the country. Okay. Michigan is only 18th. I believe that they're much better than that. I think that Michigan's one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the country at the very least.
Sure.
So I'm only basing it on a resume, and Michigan has yet to play anyone good. So Kansas does have a double-digit win against a 4-1 BYU team.
Right.
They did lose to Texas in the final score. They got blasted, but it was a 20-14 game in the third quarter. They were hanging in there, and based on my rankings, I've got Texas at number 1, so that's not a horrible loss, and they were playing on the road. And they also really took it to Illinois. The final score was only 34-23, but they had game control. They led 34-7. That was a strong win there as well.
I guess my next question, if you don't mind, would be so I know Toledo gave Illinois a game. I know they didn't beat them, but let's just pretend that I don't want to play pretend, but if Toledo had beaten Illinois, would they be maybe among the teams that you would have rated fairly high? Would that enter into your?
Yes. So I do have Toledo on my map. I do have them on my radar of teams that I'm evaluating. I believe they're 4-1 with only that loss to Illinois. Now they do play a MAC schedule. They have played a weak schedule, right? But at 5-0, I don't know that I would have them in my top 25, but they'd be awfully close. I do believe that that if I had the resources, Chris, I don't know if you've heard me state this, but if I had the resources, I would rank every team. I think every team should be ranked. I don't think there's anything magical about 25.
No. I don't know that I do either. The reason I mentioned, I don't know if I told you this or not. I know I'm kind of fixated on it. I'm sorry about it, but I think we kind of both agreed that when BYU in 1984, because that was kind of what the guy previously was at least bringing up, whether or not they, and that's always going to be a kind of a debated thing, no matter what decision we make about it. But I think we both kind of agreed that they probably played a team that was in the top 50 somewhere. I mean, and I guess my point was with West Virginia was I had them 50th before they beat Texas Christian. So, I mean, obviously you're going to move up a little bit after beating them, but it kind of, and I don't know that one year necessarily compares directly with another anyway. They might be a much better team than Michigan would have been at the same time in this season. But, generally speaking, though, I think the one reason that I keep bringing it up is like people always say, well, they can't be a national champion because they didn't play a good team in the Holiday Bowl. And, I didn't go to the game. I was like when I was 16 or so. I think I watched it on television. But I was surprised when I was watching it because I was like, so I remember watching. I was like, they were getting beat actually pretty good by Michigan for a while, and it looked like they were probably going to lose, is what it looked like. And then BYU scored 2 touchdowns in the final closing minutes to win it. But then that didn't seem to really change people's opinion because like, okay, well, you beat a 6-5 team, but I'm kind of thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, Mark, because I don't really know a whole lot about college football, but you can still be a pretty good team and not have a very good record, can't you? I mean, do you have to be a 7? I mean, is 6-5 does that necessarily make a team not very good?
No, there are good 6-5 teams. Absolutely.
Well, no, I guess my point is, it's like, I'm not saying that was for the national championship. Don't get me wrong. I understand enough about football to know that probably if they'd have played Washington or maybe, I don't know if Oklahoma was good enough to necessarily, you have the opinion that they would have lost. I don't think so, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, they didn't play Oklahoma. So I'm just saying, I think if you can beat a team as good as Michigan, I mean, if you're demonstrating something, I'm not sure exactly what you're demonstrating, but I don't know that we should like punish BYU for playing a good team is kind of what I'm trying to say.
Well, my perspective on it is that BYU won all of its games. The best team they played might have been Michigan. It might have been Air Force.
Sure.
They played a handful of teams that were top 50 teams, and they played a couple teams in Michigan and Air Force, and I can't remember exactly the schedule. You probably do better than I do. Maybe one other team that would be roughly a top 30, 35 team.
Or 40, maybe closer to 40.
Yeah, something in that range. So my only issue with BYU, it's not with BYU, it's with the decision of who should be awarded a national championship, is that they just didn't play anyone of the caliber that you would expect a team to have to play to win a national championship, let alone multiple games like that.
Right. No, I understand. I mean, I'm not even saying you're wrong about that. In fact, I think that was a problem that people had with it at the time, but I think I kind of rectified that. I don't know if you really agree with what I did, but because they did play Michigan, and I'm not saying necessarily that Michigan was the team to make the difference in the whole season, but they played them close enough to where we have to kind of at least say, well, how good was Michigan? And like I said, I had Michigan 50th after losing, which I think that's fair, at least to what I consider to be. I'm not trying to like punish or I mean, I think 50th I think is probably fair to what Michigan accomplished that year.
Yeah.
But so they beat Michigan, and I guess the point I was trying to make, and I don't know if I made it very well, was if you can beat a 6-5 Michigan team, I think at the very least, I think you're in the chase. And I know they didn't play Florida. They didn't play. I mean, you could name like a dozen teams probably that maybe would have even, who knows, potentially beaten BYU if they had to play them. But the other thing I think I told you was they had to wait till the next season, but they actually did play in a title game. They played. I know the belt isn't your favorite thing, but regardless, I mean, they did play in a title game against UCLA and lost, but it wasn't like they got beat real bad or anything. They only lost by 3 points, and it looked like they might even win it. But so they did play in a belt championship game. They got beat, but I don't know if that matters to you. But so they actually advanced to a title game is what I'm trying to tell you.
Well, I think that the belt championship that we've discussed in the past, and you've explained for everyone. So very quickly, everyone, when Chris alludes to the belt championship, what he is referring to is basically if you take the national championship, let's say who has the belt currently, Chris?
Well, Honestly, I think it's Washington, but I'm not basing my entire argument around that thing. I'm just saying that was something that we can look at, though, is what I'm trying
So
to tell you.
anyway,
Yeah.
it is passed on to the team that then defeats the team that
Yeah,
had the belt
next in line, sure.
previously, and it
Yeah.
keeps moving. And so it's a fun, gimmicky thing to keep an eye on. But does it mean anything?
Yeah, I think it does. That's kind of why I bring it up.
I don't think it means much. It means that a team beat another good team.
Well, no, not really, Mark. I think that's where you're maybe, and I haven't done a very good job explaining it. So, I mean, it's not really your fault.
There's nothing more to explain.
Colorado's championship was a belt championship. And that's kind of one of those that people say, well, did Colorado really win or not? Well, I don't know if they did or not, but that's what they won, was a belt. And then, so we can
they won an AP national championship.
Well, I know, but it also,
that's what they won.
I understand, but when they beat Notre Dame, they played, it was for a belt because Notre Dame had it because they beat USC. It keeps going all the way back.
Let me ask you this. During the broadcast of the 1990-91 Orange Bowl, how many times was it referred to as a belt championship?
It's relatively new. I mean, I'm not really even promoting the belt, Mark. I'm just trying to explain to you that if we want to get down to it. No, I mean, I'm just saying, if you want to get like,
no, I'm telling you that term was never used during the broadcast. I guarantee it.
I don't think it was either, but that's what it was for, though. You know, whether you want to agree with it or not, that's what Colorado won by beating Notre Dame, was the belt.
I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm just telling you it's insignificant.
I'm not even saying you're wrong about that. I might even be saying I agree with you, because Georgia Tech, I think, it was the team that most people thought should have won the championship regardless. So I'm not even saying you're wrong. But of course, I think you wanted Miami too. But so there's a different team there. But
no. I said that I believed that Miami was probably the best team in the country, but I don't believe that they earned a national championship. They had 2 losses.
They could have probably beaten. I mean, my guess is, I'm not even saying you're wrong about that either, because I remember how good that team was. One of the teams they actually lost to, though, just not that it really matters, but they did lose to Brigham Young that year.
Sure.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, so we have to kind of look at that as like maybe evidence that BYU has, potential, even if they haven't never quite. I mean, actually kind of halfway agreeing with you that, when they got admitted to that, whatever you want to say about the game, they actually got beat by UCLA. So they really didn't prove that they were the best team, but they got to the game, though, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, to get there, I think that's half the battle, isn't it? Whether you agree with whether
the game.
Yeah.
They had UCLA on the schedule.
Well, I know, but it's like, it'd be like the same thing. Like I said, actually, I think you asked me who the belt, it is Washington, but honestly, probably the best team that people need to knock off right now would be Georgia. But I know that's kind of a conflict there, but Washington has the belt. But I think the team that people need to knock off to carry the championship forward would probably be Georgia. But I mean, that's just, I don't know that really matters. I mean, those things generally take care of themselves. I mean, well, they do. I mean, eventually those teams will probably meet up somewhere, and it won't matter which team was better. It's going to be the team that beats the other one or whatever. But yeah, by the way the belt is, and I'm not even saying the belt's the best way to go, but they have Washington as the team with the belt right now, because they beat, I don't remember who it was, Oregon or somebody. I think that's who it was, Oregon maybe.
All right, Chris. Well, is there anything else you've got for us?
Well, yeah, if you don't mind. I mean, like I said, I don't want to waste your time, but I just noticed, and I know this isn't about your top 25, but one thing that kind of concerns me a little bit, and it's not because I disagree necessarily with what you do, but I didn't notice. I mean, maybe I missed it. Was there any G5 teams even represented in your top 25? I don't remember there being even one of them. Was there?
I don't believe so.
Okay, well, I had like 2 or 3. I mean, and that's not really a lot. In fact, I might only had 2. I don't really remember, and the only reason I had 2 is because the way I do my statistics or whatever, it included James Madison, and neither one of them are rated that high, by the way. It's not like I had them rated that high, but I had James Madison and Marshall both rated in my top 25. I'm just kind of curious why you don't have either one.
Because I can't take those teams that seriously until they defeat someone significant. And I think it has been proven year after year after year that there is a enormous gap between the group of 5 and the Power 5. The Power 5 wins 85 to 90% of those games.
Yeah, and most of them, I understand that.
And so even the very best group of 5 teams are 20th in the country, something in that range.
Yeah,
Tulane was certainly a quality team last year,
well,
but
even
let,
after
let, let me just finish this
no, that's
this
fine.
one point. And then also we have seen with the expansion of the Big 12, the best group of 5 teams, 3 of them have moved on to the Power 5. So the
Yeah.
group of 5 ranks have been further weakened.
Finish, yeah, sure. Well, no, I mean, even after beating USC, I don't know that I had Tulane rated especially very high. In fact, I think it took that win for me to push them up very high. In all fairness, I'm not even saying Tulane was all that good of a team last year. But really, that kind of says more about USC, I think, than Tulane. I mean, is USC that good? I mean, I don't even remember where you have them, but I think I have them. I actually have USC rated pretty high. But I think the pollings, I don't think they really have USC rated all that high, do they?
The national rankings, I'm guessing that USC somewhere around 6, 7, 8. I've got them at 21.
Okay.
So they need to play someone as well.
You don't think Colorado was a good team?
I think they're a top 40 to 50 team.
Yeah, kind of what I was thinking too.
Somewhere in that range.
Colorado rated all that high either. But really, that's kind of my point though, is I think a team can be in the top 50. Kind of like that's kind of the whole point I'm trying to make here. Hope you don't mind me repeating it, but I think a team can be in the top 50 and still be a really pretty good team. Oh yeah, that was the other thing I was going to tell you. I don't know if this is just an accident or not, but I had Clemson rated 50th this week after beating who was it they played? Was it
Syracuse?
I had them 50th after they won. So I mean, I don't know if again we're comparing 2 different seasons, but I mean, let's just pretend it would have been BYU beating Clemson. I mean, you don't think that would have been an impressive win if they had scheduled Clemson and beaten them and what beat them?
Yes. However, Clemson is far better than the 50th best team in the country this year, number one. Number two, there's a difference between is something a quality win or is it a win that should justify a national championship?
No, I agree with you 100%.
Completely different levels of games.
But I guess that's where I still have a question because it's like, I don't know that Michigan was, I mean, 6-6 doesn't tell you everything you need to know about them. I mean, yeah, they weren't good or bad. It's kind of the way I look at it. But why is it that people point to that game and say, okay, well, they beat a mediocre. Was it really a mediocre Michigan, or was it maybe just the?
It was the worst Michigan team under Bo Schembechler in his entire coaching tenure.
Okay. Well, at any rate, like I said, I had them finished at 50th, which is I think you halfway agreed with me on that. Maybe that was probably about right, wasn't it? Didn't you
I would actually say they were probably better than that, but
no. Well, at any rate, that's kind of where I just thought I'd just bring that up. I know you get tired of hearing about it, but
I don't get tired of hearing of it. But we've got a couple guests on the line, Chris. So okay. I appreciate you calling.
No, I appreciate it, Mark. Have a good day.
Thanks, Chris.
Have a good day.
All right, let's keep it moving along here, talking Big 12 football. We've got Cody Stovall checking in. Cody, what's going on today? I believe we've got Cody. No, we don't.
Bobby here.
Bobby.
Yeah, I was going to mention if y'all were talking about the 84 BYU team, I can remember I'm 51 now. So I can remember I was really into football even starting back then. I don't think anybody there was no that was the craziest year in football. I don't know if you remember, if you can ever remember.
Oh, absolutely.
The history of all college football. And I think there was Robbie Bosco was a quarterback for BYU back then. I can remember.
Yep.
I think those, and I don't think there was no choice but to give them the national championship that year. I remember Oklahoma had a crazy year. I think that was the year they tied Kansas. Not even a good Kansas team that year. That was a crazy year that year. So I don't know I knew you had that. Who did you have winning the national championship that year in '84?
So I don't want to take away a national championship from BYU. I believe they earned it, but I do think that if you go through the schedules and add it all together, that Washington, you can give them a national championship. They were 11-1 with an Orange Bowl win.
Yeah, sure did. Yeah, that was a crazy year. But I was going to talk about this OU Texas game coming up.
Yep.
The only problem that Oklahoma has is our running game, and I think even our O-line's been blocking fairly decent for the running backs, but our running backs, we don't have anybody to break the first tackle this year. It's been pretty bad. And I went to the Tulsa game. I'm going to the Kansas game, not to the Texas game. Those tickets are too expensive really to go to. But we can't. Our running backs are just not. We don't have anybody. We don't have that main running back that's going to probably hurt us in the game coming up, and that's a big deal that people need to realize. us Oklahoma fans, is that we don't have a running back that can break that shoestring tackle coming up, and that's gonna, if we don't get that taken care of, that's going to be a problem in the game coming up, because we're going to have our running game is going to have to improve a lot to balance it out more. They're just going to suffocate us, pretty much in that game.
Well, I am a bit curious about who's going to get the football in this game for Oklahoma because, as you know better than I do, Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk were the guys coming into this season. They had the big bowl game. Barnes had a nice season. They're the stud freshmen, the big recruits, and then they come into this season and suddenly they're on the shelf, and Marcus Major's getting the carries. Tawani Walker's getting the majority of carries. And then a couple of weeks ago, I believe against SMU, they gave Barnes and Sawchuk the ball 22 times. And then suddenly the next week again, they're back on the bench and hardly getting any carries. So I don't know what the story is.
I don't either. And maybe Walker probably looks to be about the most productive back that we have, but I don't know. I don't know what's the game plan. Though they should probably use him as the starting back for the Texas game. He's been the most productive, I think, out of all the games, and it's hard to measure it and everything like that on the offensive side. Now, on the defensive side, the thing that we're going to have to cover that middle of the field, and I don't know if I know we got number 7 or the other linebacker that's kind of new. I think that's going to be a little trouble. I think we're going to have to shore up the middle of the field on the defensive side. That's going to be a problem where we're going to have to cover their slot receivers a lot better, and that's about the only thing that I think OU's going to have to work on coming on to the game if we're going to win the game.
Yeah, it would be good to see somebody emerge as a go-to big play wide receiver. I know Andrell Anthony has fit that bill a little bit. I don't know that he's that guy, though, long term.
Yeah, that's true. But that's about all I have to say. Anything. But I enjoy your show, and it's been really good. So I've been a sub for a pretty good while, maybe couple of years, maybe. I can't remember.
Nice.
But
I appreciate it.
Good show. And all the sub channels are really good, too. So I just kind of surf all your channels, and it's, just whatever comes up and just watch a lot of it, and it's really good.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Bobby.
Okay.
Thanks for the call.
Okay, appreciate it.
Good luck on Saturday.
Thank you.
All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We've got 2 guests coming in, so let's bring them in both at the same time. Let's do that. Got Mountaineer Paul. Paul, good to see you.
How we doing, Mark?
Doing well. We got Matthew Miller representing Texas. You can join Matthew Texas Tuesdays. We talked about it, and we will talk about it more. Texas Tuesdays right here at the Voice of College Football. Got to remind me on the day. Texas Tuesdays, 7:30 Eastern time. And that is every Tuesday, of course. All right, guys, how we doing?
Doing well.
Paul, you popped on here first. We'll jump on this West Virginia deal. Nobody gave you a chance to do much of anything this year, and the team, despite the media picking you last, I did a little bit better than that, but not too many rungs higher than that. 4-1. Yeah, sure. TCU is probably not what many people expected. And possibly, of course, Pitt is taking a turn for the worse, but still impressive to reel off 3 wins against Power 5 opponents.
No doubt about it. I mean, and anytime you're holding Power 5 teams to 21 points or less, I don't care who it is, really, you're going to win a lot of football games doing that. Texas Tech, we know offensively, is still a good group. They put up 30 on Oregon, and that's a top 30 defense. So I think there's a lot to be shown for that game, even though it was in a monsoon. And they rounded back into form last week offensively as well. Pitt, yes. I think they are definitely – I don't think probably not too many people would have figured the slide that filled Jerkovich, as I call him, because he's a Pitt person, obviously. Jerkovich. We'll go with Jerkovich. The slide from 2019 till now. Yeah. The slide from 2019 till now, I don't think very many people saw that coming and really shell-shocked I think, from those hits, the most hit quarterback in football last year. But Neil Brown has done an incredible coaching job, and I think he definitely is going to warrant, if he keeps on going this direction, Big 12 Coach of the Year honors, possibly, and even get some national looks at that. It depends on the final record, of course. I think if this team finishes anywhere in the 9-3, 10-2 range, I think both of those could be options for him, based on he was the hottest coach coming in football coming into this season. And I think a lot of people, even Kirk Herbstreit, making jokes on the Pat McAfee show, calling him a lame duck coach. Anybody but West Virginia, the 14th preseason prediction, the anonymous head coach that came up before the season and said, this is a MAC roster. And so this team has really rallied behind a lot of that. And anytime, I mean, you know, I don't know if you've ever experienced any kind of bullying or any kind of doubt towards your way, but anytime something like that happens, and you have self-belief, there's a lot that can really happen for that. And I think this team is bought in. You know, one thing, when I had Brendan Baker on the show, one thing he really pointed out was there's a lot that Neil Brown gets right. On the field hasn't been the greatest, but culture, buy-in, are two things that he knocks absolutely out of the park year in and year out. And I think we're seeing some of that now. Now, do we want to go too far to one side and say that this is a Big 12 championship team? I'm not saying that either. But you can't deny Neil Brown is doing one of the best coaching jobs in the country right now, and we're very proud of him.
So the Mountaineer perspective on West Virginia football, on Neil Brown specifically, has changed considerably in about 3 weeks.
Funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
I called for his job at the end of last year, and I think it culminated in 4 years of losing. And as you know, you're a very astute historian on college football. That was as bad a 4-year run for West Virginia. And we don't claim to be a national championship contending team year in and year out. But I think how people look at Wisconsin year in and year out is kind of how we felt about ourselves over the course. And I think we've proven to be that kind of possibility each year in, year out. Up until these past 4 years, and it's been very frustrating. I think a lot of us were spoiled by the previous 20 years. You know, I mean, it is what it is with that. And so I think a lot of fans were frustrated. Neil didn't get, and by the way, Neil didn't get any NIL help this past year. Probably some, you know, Bob Huggins got it all. And you could see with that number 1 overall basketball class, the number 1 transfer portal class in the country, Neil Brown really had to select players that felt like fit the system, along with Jordan Leslie, who has had a top 50 defense 4 out of the 5 years he's coached there now, if this continues. I think, you know, a lot of it was warranted, but how things change in 3 or 4 weeks, like you said. Winning really does heal a lot of those ailments. And it's a great place to be. It's a great feeling. You know, it's been so bad. You know, so we're really happy to be 4-1 going into the bye week. It was a really tough game. A video I'm going to be making probably today or tomorrow is on TCU, and there were a lot of cheap shots in that game. And Coach Brown addressed that in the press conference today. Our left tackle Wyatt Milan went out of the game due to being poked in the eye after the whistle was blown. On tape, it's on tape. I'm sure they might review that. Tomas Remak goes out of the game with a lower leg injury on a play that was after the whistle on a field goal. You know, there's a few things that a lot of us don't agree with. I know that's a little off topic, but just there was a lot of challenges going to TCU and playing them guys at night. Sonny Dykes hadn't lost the game. So I think we're really proud of the group.
Well, I bring you guys on to bring up things that I may not be aware of. So you are free to bring up anything concerning West Virginia football. Clint Moses, thank you, says Mark, you are a gentleman and put on an amazing show. Definitely helped me through hard times just watching and chatting. That's very nice to know. Clint, thank you for leaving that comment. That those kind of comments make my day. Matthew, how you doing?
I'm doing good, other than the little internet snafu at the beginning of this, but other than that, doing pretty good.
Everybody has those. So as I said to Paul, a lot can change in 3 or 4 weeks. And for Texas, 3 or 4 weeks, I got to say that Steve Sarkisian's hiring, to me, I did not check it off as this is a home run hire. I did not criticize it. I questioned it to say, if you look at USC, they were a little bit better before him. Well, they were a lot better before him, and they were probably at some point very quickly better without him. It wasn't like they cratered with him. Washington, the same thing. So here's a coach who's had 2 major jobs, and he didn't do anything with either one. Now, we know that he had off the field issues. Then he goes to Alabama, goes through that, what has become, affectionately known by many as the, Nick Saban Home for Wayward Coaches rehabilitation program, the whole deal. And he gets a Texas job, so a top 5 job in the nation. I wasn't sold. Again, I wasn't predicting his demise. I just didn't understand the hire. And he's 5-7, then he's 8-5. And here we are, year 3. So he started this season with a lot of questions in his direction.
Yeah, 100%. I wasn't a fan either. That was actually one of my first videos on here with you. I thought it was like a C+ hire at the time, but I said because of the staff he hired around him, I thought it turned into an A hire. I mean, look at the offensive line coach, Kyle Flood. He has experience anywhere. He was a head coach at one point at Rutgers, offensive line coach at Alabama. He's very good at what he does. You also have Jeff Banks, who's one of the best tight end special teams coaches in the country. And people don't realize, like, Alabama tried to keep him from us. Like, they were competing to keep him. His salary's where it's at. I think he's the highest paid assistant, or was when he was hired at the time, because Alabama was like, nope, you're staying here, and kept throwing money his way. And we kept throwing money, and we eventually won that out. So, like, they wanted him really bad. A guy that's now the head coach at Temple, he kept on. That's the only guy that stayed from Tom Herman's staff is Stan Drayton, and he's very good. He's not a good head coach, clearly, with Temple, but no one really is other than Matt Rule in my lifetime. So I can't really too much flack for that. But he's a really good running backs coach. Bijan and Roshan both talked about him, raved about him, loved him. I like the hires that he's had after the guys that have left. Like Brennan Marion came in for 1 year, and now he's the offensive coordinator for a good UNLV team. And then we replace him and with Chris Jackson from the NFL. So this staff, he's just done a really good job of hiring people on his staff. And I think that's the key. I mean, if you look at Mark, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Look at Alabama's staff, and I think that's part of the reason they're not as good as they usually are. They're still very good, obviously, but they're not like that elite can't touch them, because that staff was so good. You had like 4 or 5 head coaches on a staff at one time, and I think that's what Texas is starting to do. Jeff Banks will be a head coach at some point. If Kyle Flood wants to dip his toe back into it, he probably could. Jeff Banks might not be here more than 1 or 2 years. I think Chris Jackson, again, if he wants to, will go back to the NFL as probably an offensive coordinator, because that's the next step for him. So, I mean, there's just talent on the roster. Marry that with the coaching staff, marry that with the culture, because honestly, with Tom Herman, it was the thing that hits me with Tom Herman. I don't know if anyone else remembers this, but they played Baylor, and they were like teetering. And to get people fired up, he's headbanging all the players. I'm like, and no one looks enthused. So they could tell that was an act by Tom Herman, and that's not authentic. That's what players hate the most, is inauthenticity. If you're not an authentic person and you have to fake stuff like that, they hate it. And Steve Sarkisian from the jump has gone through battles in his life. I don't know if anyone else has heard multiple interviews from him, long portions where he sits down and talks with people. But the battles that he's gone through with alcoholism have changed him. It has. He will say that straight up. He is not the same person. He was arrogant. He was stupid. He was cocky, and that is gone. And I think his religion, I know he's Christian, has also helped that. So, I mean, a lot of this, man, I think it's just perfect timing for everything for him to come to this program, and he's kind of changed it into his mold. And you see he was always, there was no question, he was always good on the offensive side of the ball. I think it was managing people and managing players, and I think him battling that has really reined him in and made him a better person with that, and he's talked about that.
That is a funny dynamic, because I've had a few people comment to me that are much younger than me, much hipper than me, and so forth. And then I interact with them. I get along with them, but I don't try to be them. I don't try to talk like I don't know how to talk. I don't try to like use words I don't know, or try to understand, or talk about things that are on the current, pop culture scene that I know nothing about. And they just say, I've heard, like I've had interactions with 25 years old that have been fine with that. And they're just like, well, that's not you. So don't try to be something that you're not. obviously.
Yeah, and Tom Herman reminds me of, you guys probably know Mike McDaniel for the Dolphins, kind of nerdy.
Sure.
He's funny, quirky. That's who Tom Herman actually is. And then
Yeah.
to act like a hardo, it'd be like Mike McDaniel going out on the field and doing that. Like everyone would be like, what the hell's your issue? You're not that type of guy. That's more of a Dan Campbell thing. So if you're Dan Campbell, do it. But if you're Tom Herman, stay away from that stuff. Be who you are. And we'll see if he's learned, because he'll get another opportunity, because he was a good offensive coordinator where he's been at. And with FAU, I don't know how they're doing with Casey Thompson out, but he'll get more opportunities.
Paul, between you and Matthew, you guys obviously West Virginia, Texas, you don't play this year, but many meetings in the Big 12. So I will certainly ask questions and make comments. But if you guys have interactions with each other, questions for either team or program, certainly fire away.
I'll tell you something about Sarkisian you mentioned was those battles with alcoholism. And I'm also in recovery 3 years.
Okay.
And so that really resonated with me. Hearing Steve Sarkisian talk about that stuff. Really appreciate you bringing that up there, because it is important. And it's, he's got such a great platform to talk about those things. And I think there's a lot of coaches, because of the pressure cooker that is a Power 5 head coaching job, probably also explains why Tom Herman was acting like that just a little bit. It's such a pressure cooker there at Texas. I think you try to do anything to try to resonate with the players. And even though it came off like it did, like you're saying, when you're 100% accurate in saying that, I think that may be a little bit of the why to it. If I was guessing from an outsider's point of view, I could be completely off on that. But I guess I have a question about Texas for sure. Do you guys still have questions, or do you guys still have fears about, the running joke is same old Texas, that you hear every year. And being that Alabama is certainly not, I'm sure you've heard this so many times, but they're not a typical Alabama team this year. They're a very good team. They have 5-star talent all over the field, but this is not, the team they even had last year. And does that give you guys questions going forward? Or do you just look at that win for what it is and kind of just take it for what it is and hold on to that? Just curious about that.
I think it's both. Like you said, they're not like the typical Alabama team, but I still think they're going to probably end up going at worst 10-2. Like if they escape A&M this weekend, your next hardest game and your only hard game after that, in my opinion, that could probably beat them is LSU. And LSU is going to have to get better, because they're not beating Alabama right now. So still a 10-2 Alabama team's the top 10 team in the country. So you definitely take that win in a place that's basically impossible to win at. Like if you look at the last 5 or 6 guys to do it, they're all really great college players, and some of them were good NFL players as well. So I think Quinn Ewers we'll see how he does in the NFL. But yeah, it's a little bit of both. And I think what the biggest point in that game to me was when we went down 17-16, if we were the same old Texas, that game would have been over, because that's the issue with Texas in the past is anytime there was adversity, anytime it wasn't going our way, it would basically be, let's mail it in. We had a good 2-3 quarters of football, but we're not going to win this game. And I think there's this toughness. There was this story. I can't believe they did this. It was either on Texas Football or Inside Texas was talking about this. Teray Becton, great strength and conditioning coach. They have a policy. If you're going to puke, you have to do it standing up. So that just those little things like that's going to, I mean, I don't know if anyone likes throwing up, and I don't think you like throwing up all over your chest. So it's just one of those things. I think there's this toughness ingrained into it. Some people that don't watch football or pay attention to football may act like that's too harsh, and it may be. I don't know. That's up for you to decide. But in my opinion, it's football. And I think this toughness has been ingrained into these players. I think they're a lot more mentally tough than they ever have been. Now, will we see? I want to see when we're punched back again, because Alabama didn't really punch back after that. We immediately got an interception after we scored that one touchdown when they were up 17-16. Like, let's say we play Oklahoma. They go up by 1, we come back down and score, but then they score again. Can we do it again? So basically a sparring match. Can we do that? Because I felt like once we intercepted Alabama and scored again, that was basically the knockout blow. With Jalen Milroe, he's not the type of quarterback to lead that comeback. So there's still some questions, but they are definitely being answered week by week, in my opinion.
No doubt about it.
And with you guys, I was too low on you. I was higher than most people, but I was still too low. I said 5-7. I think you guys are going to finish at least 7-5. Like, your schedule's not that hard. You guys are playing your type of football. I think your only issue is if you get into a track meet, but you guys are dictating the games at this point. So
yeah,
I mean, I told Mark, I'm glad we don't play you, because you're the type of team that can dictate. If you could dictate the pace, could beat us, because you just hold on the ball the whole time. But
Right. Our offensive line is capable of running it against anybody. We did it against Penn State, and they've got an excellent defense. And if we had any offense to complement our defense in that game, we probably could have walked out of there with a win. It was definitely to be had. James Franklin obviously scores the backdoor touchdown as time is running out, and that covered the spread. And it looks worse than it actually was. It was actually a close game against Penn State. We really fought hard in that game, but they're a really good football team. Drew Aller, I think, was a lot better than a lot of us thought he was going to be. He's very similar to your guy and what he looked like coming out, just slinging it right off the rip. So I'm really impressed with him. But I think if you look at our schedule and how it lines up, and what a day for the bye week to come in this week. Aubrey Burks, who is a preseason All-American at safety, scary moment against TCU. I don't know if you had a chance to watch the game. But,
I watched the second half.
It looked like he broke his neck at one point in that
Yeah.
game. He's actually walking, thank goodness. Trey Lathan, who was in that recruiting class with C.J. Donaldson, unfortunately breaks his leg against TCU. Thank God we've got what we think is an up-and-coming will linebacker to replace him. And so, and then those offensive linemen that were hurt will be back. So, you come out of this thing almost unscathed. You lose one player. I think we can definitely bounce back as a defense. And that defense is definitely our calling card, obviously, in the running game. You look at the upcoming schedule. You've got Houston on a Thursday night against the Fighting Dana Holgersons. I think we win that football game maybe by a score or two. I mean, we're not the greatest offense, but I think we can definitely control the line of scrimmage on both sides in that game. And then you start to look at how the schedule lines up after that. UCF will be a tough game for us. I think BYU will be a tough game for us. The Oklahoma game is the hardest game left on the schedule. Cincinnati, I think, is a win. Baylor at the end of the schedule, although they looked better yesterday, I think is a win. I looked at it yesterday, and if things go right, I think 9-3 is a very real for this team at this point. Now I'm a little biased. I understand that, but I was leaning towards the not very objective, but still, I think 9-3 is attainable for this team.
Yeah, it definitely could be. I would agree. I think UCF is definitely going to be a hard game because just a total contrast of playing styles. And I mean, in football, it's the same as boxing. Styles make fights. So that's it. Honestly, whoever dictates that pace on it would probably kill the other team. Because I think if West Virginia played the way they wanted to, they'd probably win that game like 27-14. And if UCF played that game the way they wanted to, they'd win like 35-10.
For sure. To hold that TCU team to negative yards in the third quarter of that game, you saw the defensive performance.
Yeah.
Our defense is for real. And TCU hit on a couple of big plays. And I think, Chandler Morris is a really good player. He's a lot better than I thought he was. He's extremely agile. I wasn't expecting that kind of speed to come from him. And I think it took some adjusting. They still run. It's a little bit different style. It's not as polished as what last year's was because they changed the coordinators and everything. But I think TCU is going to end up being a good football team. I still think they'll win 7 or 8 games.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I had them at 7-5 or 8-4 at the beginning of the season, but I think it was unrealistic. I heard multiple TCU fans say we're going to win 9-10 games. You lost way too much NFL talent at a place where you don't replace it like that. Like, it's going to take you 2 to 3 years to get those guys back. Whereas that's why Alabama, Georgia, Michigan can stack up these years year in and out because the next guy behind them is going to play in the NFL too. TCU is just not like that, and I thought that was unrealistic.
Yeah, for sure. But at the end of the day, it's looking like West Virginia could possibly finish in the top 4.
Yeah, for sure.
And to finish 10 spots better than not just some people, literally everyone, almost literally everyone said you're the worst team in this conference, even worse than the 4 newcomers who've been recruiting at a group of 5 level. You know what I mean? And we've been recruiting as a power 5 level for almost ever. So it was very frustrating from a fan standpoint to see that much disrespect, knowing that we had a ton of talent on this team, and not to mention several 4-star recruits coming in this year. And it was frustrating. But I'm glad to see Neil Brown, really, because he's such a good guy. And you hear this a lot about Neil Brown, but he's such a nice guy and such a good family man and a godly man that you don't want to see him. It was just so much pressure for him to be under, and I felt really good to see him win and be able to kind of stand on his own 2 feet and proclaim some things rather than always having to shrink at press conferences.
Yeah, I had you guys 11th, but and that's obviously going to be too low. Like I said, 5 and 7. But yeah, deep diving, I don't understand the 14th because when I dove into everyone's roster, your guys' offensive line, I think I had ranked this third best, and you could argue. I think I had Texas, Kansas State, and West Virginia in the top 3, and you could argue number 1 for those 3. So I was like, and then your defensive line's pretty good too. So I don't understand if you're going to be good on the lines of scrimmage, you're always going to win football games. So yeah,
top 3 unit on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, especially with Iowa State, what happened with them, and then Cincinnati's just bad coaching hire, and then not a good roster, and who you have at quarterback. I didn't see that. I even had you above Houston too, because I think Dana Holgorsen, that people were talking about that being like a firing bowl. Dana Holgorsen's he's gone after this year. Like Houston's gonna fire him.
Real quick, one other thing I wanted to point out is before the season, I almost did a video on this. He said he had the best wide receiver room he's ever had. Not at Houston, ever had coming into this year. And I looked back and I thought, am I blind or did I not see Stedman Bailey and Tavon Austin and those guys put up 70 on Clemson in the Orange Bowl?
Well, not even that.
Their head coach.
You just lost the best wide receiver you had from the room in the NFL.
Tank.
I was gonna say, so he leaves, then just a better room now. That doesn't. No, that's. Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
But what I was gonna say is, what is West Virginia's point of view on Texas? I know, like, for whatever reason, West Virginia, everyone in the Big 12 hates Texas. I understand that. So, but what is your West Virginia's fan point of view?
Well, I don't think I can speak for the entire fan base, but from what I gather, I have a show, so obviously I see a lot of the, I would say probably both sides, but for the most part, I think most of our fans are kind of on board with you guys being definitely a legit Big 12 title contender and a playoff team. And I think that's been proven over the course of the first 4 and 5 games, depending on if you had a bye week yet or not. But I mean, if you're asking, most fans root against you guys. I think at this point, just based on how everything happened, I think, even from Brett, the way, even Brett Yormark has kind of led the charge against the teams leaving. And even though he hasn't said much outright, he has said a few things that I think has probably tilted the fan bases even further towards the outgoing teams. And I think it was a little bit of a rallying cry at that point as well, too, for the remaining teams. And kind of, in my opinion, a little bit of a slick way to unify the remaining teams. I think that's what he was trying to do with that. But at the end of the day, to the detriment of Texas, I think a lot of people root against you guys. Doesn't change how good you are. You guys, listen, when I looked at our schedule this year, we were able to replace Kansas, Texas, and Kansas State with Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, I mean, I was glad not to see you on a schedule. I don't care. Even when you guys haven't been good, I didn't want to see you on a schedule. There's still a bunch of 5-star guys in that roster every year, So, I mean, there's always going to be a position on the field where they're just going to be better than you at, and you've got to shade towards that side of the field, or you've got to give this lineman help towards that guy. Well, this year, it's at multiple spots. And even our offensive line would struggle with that defensive line that you guys have, as they did last year. But they also struggled with the tech front last year and dominated them. They've gotten a lot better. But still, that front that you guys have, in my opinion, you could argue is a strength of your team. Defensive front.
Yeah, I've said to Mark multiple times, I think our front seven's one of the best, if not the best in the country, because our linebackers are playing really well too.
It's good. You guys have got 3 picks, probably first 2 rounds on that front 7.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I know Tavondre Sweat's been mocked to the first round by everyone I see. He's basically a first-round pick at this point, unless he gets hurt. I think he'll end up being a first-round pick. Byron Murphy's interesting. I actually think he's got the higher upside, but I don't know where he's going to get drafted. I haven't seen any mock draft with first round. I've seen a couple with second. So, I mean, if they give him enough money, he may come back, because it's like Tavondre Sweat came back. He would have been probably a 4th-round pick last year and made himself a lot of money. If Byron Murphy come back, he could probably, I mean, if he gets any better, he's going to be a first-round pick because I think it's more consistency with him. But he was the best game I've ever seen him play was this year versus Baylor. They couldn't block. They were double teaming him. He couldn't block him. He split double teams, multiple tackles for loss, 2 sacks in the game. He's just a beast. Our defensive tackles are definitely the strength of our team, and even the edges have been playing pretty good too.
No doubt about it. Our strength, I think, is just we play 11 guys on the defensive line, and there is almost no drop off from 1 to 11. The first time since I've been a fan of West Virginia, we can be able to say that. And it's them guys have really recruited. We picked up a guy from Penn State, Batoma Mulba, who was just sitting. He wasn't playing because Penn State's style of defensive tackle right now is more athletic, penetrating style of defensive tackle, and this guy is a road grader. Especially if you play a 3-down front, he eats blocks alive. And I talked to Israel Chumba, the left tackle at Penn State before the season, and said, what's this kid going to be all about? And he said he is the stoutest run defender on the Penn State roster. And that has shown to be true for us this first few games of the season, just talking about defensive fronts. And he's been a huge surprise, and doesn't show up in the stat sheet a lot, but man, he eats blocks alive and eats centers alive so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important. And I mean, that's the transfer portal right there. You can go and get a player like that before. He would have just sat on the bench and Penn State would have got him next. So I think that's also why you see such like parity this year. We know great teams, but a lot of really good teams too.
Agreed.
But who do you think is going to end up in the Big 12 championship? I honestly think we could lose this game and we're still going to end up there. I don't know about Oklahoma. Like, I know they're undefeated. I know they're ranked high, but can they play a top 80, 70 offense, I guess? Top 70 is what I'll say. I won't say 80. I think Cincinnati's probably, the 70 or 70th best offense in the country? I don't know. But, like, that's the best offense they've played probably. Maybe SMU, but none of those offenses scare you.
No, Texas Tech dominated SMU the week before we played them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think at this point you have to think Oklahoma and Texas might meet again in the Big 12 championship. I think those are both the front runners to do so, to the chagrin of probably the rest of the league. Would probably, and that's probably poetic justice. That's how it's going to happen. But obviously, K-State would be a team Chris Kleiman teams you just can't sleep on. All they do is win. All they do is win the right way. They play the right way. That guy's got national championship DNA, and he knows how to coach. So I think him. And obviously Kansas is, and I never thought I would say that, but I think those are the 4 teams, if you're looking at it right now, are the 4. Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas State, and Kansas are the top 4 teams, obviously. And it's among those guys, amongst that group. I wouldn't dare put us in that conversation yet. I think we're happy to be somewhere in that 6 range as of right now. But if we, I think we take care of business to Houston, and then we'll see what we have ahead after that, taking this thing one game at a time from the West Virginia perspective. But I do think we could sneak in. It's possible. It depends on how we play. We've got BYU at home. I think that's really important. Going to the bounce house is going to be tough for us. And then an Oklahoma game is going to be so pivotal. That's going to be the game, in my opinion, that decides whether or not we're that caliber team, obviously, but whether we play in a really good postseason bowl or just an average one. So I think we can, you can start to think about us and maybe throw us in the conversation of potential teams outside that top 4.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Paul, we appreciate you being here. So everybody, it's Paul Mountaineer. You see it on Twitter. So Mountaineer Paul, you can find right here on YouTube. If people, Paul, just look up Mountaineer Paul on YouTube, is that the best way to find you?
Yep. If you throw a Talk Football in there afterwards, it'll definitely come up. But just throw Mountaineer Paul in, and it almost always brings me up.
That's it, folks. Mountaineer Paul right here on YouTube. So check him out. Paul, we appreciate you stopping by. Folks, we're putting together a live stream for later this week. We really want to dissect the West Virginia program. They've got a bye week, the 4-1 start, what Neil Brown's doing, what he might be doing differently, how legit it is, all those angles, considering what we talked about off the top that this is a much different look for West Virginia football than what people anticipated. So, Paul, appreciate you being here.
Thanks. And nice to meet you as well, bro.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
All right, guys. Thank you.
See you.
And we got Matthew Miller here again. It's Texas Tuesdays. So, Matthew, you can at any time to get that thing revved up, throw it on the main channel. But we want to do everything we can, folks, to number one, build up our Texas Tuesdays audience. It's every Tuesday at 7:30 Eastern time. It's on our Big 12 channel. We want to build that up as well. So we've got Big 12 content on our Big 12 channel that you can get the link to in the description section. So it's Texas Tuesdays. We're only one day away. So mark it down, get there, and join Matthew.
Yep, we'll be recapping Kansas just a little bit, but it's going to be a deep dive into Oklahoma because it's always a game. It's the biggest game circled every year. It doesn't matter who we play, even Alabama. We hate them. We hate them 365 days a year. We don't hate Alabama 365 days a year. We only hate them the day we play them. So it's OU hate week, and I'm excited to break it down.
Nice. All right, Matthew. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no problem, Mark. See you.
All right, let's keep it rolling. Talking the Big 12 here at the Voice of College Football. We have covered it from all angles, so keep in mind that you've probably missed the last 2+ hours. So definitely check in with what you missed. Once a video posts, you can go through the entire video, watch a lot of great conversation on the Big 12. We got Cody Stovall checking in. Cody, we appreciate you being here.
Yes, Mark. I greatly appreciate the invite as always. It's it's a time, and you know what? Oklahoma State had a bye week, so I got to take in and enjoy some of the Big 12 slate. Obviously, I would say the parity of the league is still obviously extremely eventful. We're not as strong as we were last year, but overall, it's some pretty good football still to be watched.
All right, so I'm gonna zero in on your team. Because they're having all sorts of issues. So you expected this to be a better team than just about anyone else did. The quarterback situation, you can outline that for everyone. We had Josh Neighbors on. We did hit on the quarterback situation. He gave his broader perspective, of course, as a Big 12 guy, but you cover this team each and every day. So what has gone wrong?
Well, unfortunately, it seems like we continue to try to put a square peg in a round hole, right? Whenever you look at the Big 12 slate this weekend offensively, there's so many teams that are very innovative, very creative. Oklahoma State is not. When we played South Alabama, it was pretty saddening and disheartening to hear their defensive players talk about how it was like slow motion because they knew every single play we were going to run. They knew what to check in of and what to check out of. Things of that nature just don't seem to be going in the right direction, whether it be with Mike Gundy, Casey Dunn. There's a disconnect somewhere. Now, defensively, we have some things that look okay, but you're right. I bought in hook, line, and sinker to this offseason, right? A more present Gundy, much more involved, attending position meeting and things of that nature that Gundy hadn't typically done since around 2017. So you thought maybe the buy-in was legitimately going to lead to a different outcome. And the players bought in as well. The thing of it is what we prepared this offseason, the spring and the summer, and what we're running now, it's not the same. And then when you factor in, when you rotate 3 quarterbacks and 70 some odd players, if it works out, Gundy's a genius, right? If you rotate 70 dudes, 4 games, you're 4-0, then you got the bye week before K-State, then Gundy's the smartest guy in football because Kansas State, Iowa State, nobody has a game plan to stop Oklahoma State because you got to prepare for 70 dudes and 3 quarterbacks. The downside was if it didn't work out, it was going to look pretty maddening. And unfortunately, that's the situation we're in.
Yeah, so, of course, let's see, Central Arkansas was game number 1, and nobody wants to take too much from that. But now that we've seen it play out for another 4 weeks, you do take something from that because that was a struggle. Arizona State has just been an awful football team. Oklahoma State trailed for a little bit in that game, but took control, won by 2 scores. But again, Arizona State, my goodness, has been atrocious. Couldn't put a point on the board against Fresno State. Then the South Alabama was the one that kind of across the nation was all of a sudden, okay, this is real. What's going on here for a team that's usually racking up 8 or 9 wins when South Alabama, when you lose to a group of 5 and then you lose whatever 33-7.
Yeah, there's we knew that them having 31 transfers at the Division I level was going to make it, a little bit of a game. Now, there's nobody in the country, I think, that would have guessed that we would have got completely destroyed the way that we did. But again, it just shows our lack of innovation and creativity from an offensive standpoint. Defensively, we did okay, but, kudos to Major Applewhite. They knew the areas to exploit. And that seems to be the biggest thing that you're seeing over the last couple of years with Mike Gundy. This is 5 of the last 7 games that Mike Gundy's come on afterwards and said, well, we got out coached, we got outplayed, we got out hustled. That seems to be the issue, right? We have the same problem week in and week out. And whenever you have these style of issues, you're going to have some fracturing in the locker room occasionally. And Mark, I know you've been doing this more than long enough to know when you lose a locker room, it's almost impossible to reel it back in, right? Here we are at a bye week. This is a critical juncture of the season for Oklahoma State, because if there's enough buy-in in the locker room to win this game, it still gives you some hope, right? It still gives you something to look forward to, maybe a shot at a bowl game. But this whole thing is just kind of falling off the wheels. And what it's done is it's shed a light on Mike Gundy being, a lack of absence over the course of time. And he thought he had this thing as such a well-oiled machine that he didn't have to be physically as involved as he used to be. And let's face it, before the transfer market and NIL, maybe this works, right? Maybe this top-down CEO approach, it works out. But when you have to be more personable and more understanding of your players now more than ever, you're seeing that top-down approach not work out so well. And in my personal opinion, it feels like Gundy and Dunn have lost so much of the beat of the team, the beat of the locker room, and the trajectory of the game in college football that it's hard for us to be able to fix it. I don't know that there is an in-season fix at this point in time, unfortunately.
Yeah, so let's address the quarterback situation. So, for people that have not been watching, Alan Bowman's obviously a quarterback that is familiar to Big 12 fans. He had a season and a half roughly as the starting quarterback at Texas Tech. He went to Michigan, got completely lost there, comes back to Oklahoma State. Spencer Sanders is a guy that set all sorts of Oklahoma State records, rushing, passing, 95 or 100 career touchdowns combined, did all sorts of good things. And now he's sitting on the bench at Ole Miss. So that raises an eyebrow as to what's going on there. They could really use him at Oklahoma State. So you've got Gunnar Gundy and Garrett Rangel is a player that Josh mentioned as a guy that is a possibility as being the quarterback of the future. So bring us up to date on how that's been handled and how you would handle it going forward.
Originally, it was every quarterback was going to get 4 series, and Gundy did stick to that strictly for the first few games. Now, he did kind of bounce around who was going to start, who was going to close, that style of, transitionary period between the quarterbacks. And I do think that Alan Bowman didn't exactly, get the bill of goods that he was sold. A more simplistic, old school style of offense, similar to the one he ran at Michigan. And then he comes to Oklahoma State, and we're asking him to do kind of the old school Texas Tech thing. I do think Garrett Rangel has the highest upside. Gunnar Gundy seems to be, somebody that can help in the running game because he has a little bit more mobility. And most people thought Gunnar Gundy was kind of, leading the quarterback room per se after the first few games. And then, he had a refusal to start a game. That's never a good look, which put Bowman in somewhat of a precarious situation. And then Garrett Rangel had a little bit of a sickness and then hasn't really got an opportunity since. It's been a disaster. Clearly, Gundy would have loved for Bowman to come in, be the 5th-year guy that knows the Texas Tech stuff, the Michigan stuff, right? Can help teach that room. But it just it didn't grow as organically as he wanted to. And there's been somewhat of a legitimate conversation behind him at quarterback. And now you're seeing a little bit more of Alan Bowman. And it just doesn't look great, man. He's 5 years into playing college football. And if you watch the previous game against Iowa State, this is not hyperbole. he had more yards running backwards than he did stepping up into the pocket. Literally, it was just a wild thing to see somebody drift 15, 18 yards backwards and then throw it off of 1 foot, sidearm. Like it works in backyard football, but it doesn't seem to work all that great in the game. The last time Gunnar Gundy got a bulk of the snaps, he almost threw 4 or 5 picks. It's not good, man. It is not good. It's not good at all. What I would do moving forward is stick with a guy. And at this point in time, I don't think any fan really cares who the guy is. If it's going to be Bowman, going to be Gundy, going to be Garrett Rangel, I would still put some money on the development of Garrett Rangel personally. I think we've seen enough from the other two and not enough from Rangel to make that differentiation quite yet. But this is a bye week opportunity to do something. But traditionally, the last couple of years, we have not done good coming off of bye weeks. Last time we had a bye week, we faced the same K-State squad that beat us like redheaded stepchildren and took us behind the woodshed. And it doesn't look great that things are looking positive for this game as well.
We've got our guy Cody Stuvall here from Locked On Oklahoma State. You can find it right here on YouTube. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, obviously the daily show, Locked On Oklahoma State. You can find me on Twitter at @AllDayOState as well. I like to stay pretty engaged and active. Instagram, it's OState All Day. Same with Facebook, OState All Day as well.
All right. So Mike Gundy has as much equity at this school than just about any coach in the country, based on longevity, based on winning, and based on the expectations being what they are, which are kind of, they aren't elite, but they're raised based on his success, actually.
Yes, sir.
So how much heat is he taking from the fan base? Where does he stand in regards to hot seat status?
You nailed it, right? Mike Gundy's developed so much clout just in the city of Stillwater alone that it's going to afford him a decent leash here. So I will say, though, some of the fan base is starting to come around to the idea that the complacency that has put Gundy in this precarious of a situation is a direct result of what you're seeing on the field, right? So his complacency over the years has grown some frustration with some of the fan base. So I would say before the season start, right, would Gundy be on the hot seat? Most of the fan base would say 10% chance. Right now, I would say it's like a 30 to 40% chance because people are seeing a trend now, right? Last year, you could say, okay, this is a one-off. This is not going to happen again. This is the worst year Gundy's had since 2005. But you're seeing the exact same thing this season. And unfortunately, it's the exact same issues within the continuity of the locker room that you're starting to see a little bit of a trend. And some fans, I think, are realizing that in the new iteration of the Big 12, you can't afford to go too far backwards. So if we only win one more game, yeah, he'll be at least on the warm seat. He'll be in a position that I think Weiberg has no choice but to have him sit down at the table and see how reasonable he's willing to be, whether it be a 1-year deal, whether it be, guys, I don't understand if this thing keeps going this way, why Gundy wouldn't want to ride off in the sunset as the greatest legendary coach in the history of football. It's almost like watching that old school boxer fight one too many two fights, right? That's what it feels like. That's what it looks like. But he has built up enough clout that he's got a pretty long leash.
Yeah, as these teams are added to the Big 12, they are not elite programs, but they're also not pushovers. There's a lot of potential there. Utah has obviously been a strong, solid, rock solid as their head coach program. Colorado's got this Deion factor that, man, you talk about a wild card. They have certainly gone from being in the abyss to rock star status. We can fill out a roster like nobody's business. And so they've thrown together sure, we can make fun of them getting run off the field by Oregon or whatever, but he's done a remarkable job there. And then he's going to have another recruiting cycle and going to have another transfer portal class coming into the Big 12. There's talk out there that they might be the favorite next year. And Arizona State have not been great, but they can be really good, not great. They can be really good. It's been done in their history, and they're coming from a recruiting place in Arizona where their high school football talent is going up and up and up and up every year. It's a much better football state than it's been in the past. So yeah, you can't fall behind.
Well, no,
And not, I'm sorry, Cody, not to cut you off. And then you talk about the 4 newbies maybe not being quite up to the challenge right now. They're 0-6 in the conference, but they're not going to stand still, especially like a UCF. They came into this league with intent.
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, we can't afford to go backwards. And like I've seen a couple comments here that all right, the only team in the Big 12 over the last 15 years that has more wins is OU, right? And then traditionally speaking, Texas is obviously there as well. So when OU and Texas are gone, just based off of success over the last 15 to 20 years, Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor, those are the teams that should be at the top. And then I obviously have to factor in Utah to that as well. BYU's had significant amount of success over the years, and nobody can question whether they're playing Power 5 schedules or not. So yeah, Oklahoma State should be towards the top. But the question is, if you go backwards, right, let's say we end the season 11th, 12th in the Big 12, and then we have another situation where we lose 25, 26, 27 transfers, a good chunk of starters, you're not in a good spot moving forward. And it's not like we can financially just Texas dollar bill y'all our way back up to the top. So this building from within, right, getting guys that are kind of undervalued, 2-star, 3-star, build them up for 2 years. By the time they're juniors in Stillwater, they're ready to compete for Big 12 titles. In this transfer era market, most of those guys aren't going to want to hang around for 2 years anymore. So I understand that Gundy's trying to appease people to some degree by this rotation of madness. But what happens in the appeasement is you're getting the guys who know they can be contributors and difference makers. They're the ones getting pushed to the side, which creates even bigger barriers for this transfer stuff. Yeah, man, it's not a good time to be going the wrong way. I feel that's pretty commonsensical.
Well, Cody, we can't leave you on a sour, bad note. We got to bring up something good. So who's playing good football for this team, either side of the ball?
Well, fortunately, on the defensive side of the ball, we still have a few guys that are former freshman All-Americans and Kendall Daniels and Colin Oliver. Statistically, they're leading the team or right behind the team next to Nick Martin as far as the defensive categories, tackles for loss, sacks, things of that nature. So defensively, we've got some guys that are NFL ready, and you can see it on the field. So there's still some bright sides to look at. And then offensively, we have some talent at wide receiver, and we have one of the more talented running backs we've had in a while in Ollie Gordon. So there's NFL talent on the roster. We're just incapable at the moment of putting them in the best positions to be successful, whether it be scheme or just, whether we're going to blitz or something to that effect. We need to get that stuff ironed out, right? Your guys got to get the ball. And then on the opposite side of the ball, you have to scheme your guys a way to be around the ball the most. So we'll see in this off week if that's something we've prepared. Get the playmakers the ball in space and get the defensive guys more opportunities to pin their ears back and do what they do.
Hey, Cody, I know this makes you sick, but is it a little bit different this year? This being the last time in the Big 12, is this going to move you a little bit differently one way or the other?
Well, honestly, man, I hate it. It does hurt. It does hurt to say this, but I'm actually intrigued for Red River because I like watching quality football. And what you've seen out of Steve Sarkisian schematically is amazing, right? He is scheming ways for Quinn Ewers to be more successful. They do a lot of things where they have eye candy and they manipulate the defense and they isolate linebackers on tight ends and, get people in the flats and the seams they're caught flat-footed. It's been fun to watch. Dylan Gabriel looks pretty daggone good. OU's defense looks significantly improved. So it's a legit Red River. And here's the biggest bright side to this game is one of them has to lose, right? So if one of them loses and then catches another loss, then they don't end up in the Big 12 title game. That's the best case scenario. The worst case would be those two end up in the Big 12 title game on the way out. That would be horrendous for Big 12 marketing, right? That would be great for SEC marketing. It almost looks like it's inevitable that one of them will end up in it. I don't care who the other team is, KU, West Virginia, K-State. It can't be both of them, right? So thankfully, one of them has to take a loss this Saturday, but it should be a legitimately good football game.
And that has been one of the storylines that I've brought up about the Big 12, just in terms of the fascination of the dynamic of, okay, you got these 4 new teams in, and I got exactly what I wanted. I got the 4 new teams in at the same time that I got Oklahoma and Texas still in the league. So at least 1 year of them mixing together. And then secondly, okay, since this was announced, the Big 12 made it through 2 straight championship games with no OU or Texas. So they were able to say, hey, yeah, see ya, but you're not the best, at least. But it's not looking good this year, especially on the Texas side. They look seriously legit.
I mean, I wish I could say something to the contrary, but no, man. They do look legitimate. They do look obviously at the top of the Big 12. You know, shout out to West Virginia for kind of making things interesting, and then Kansas State. Kansas State will have the opportunity to kind of solidify that they're still in the running. They're still at the top half if they beat Oklahoma State Saturday or Friday in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
For some reason, it's always just been stuck in my head going back to the Bill Snyder days. Don't sleep on Kansas State. Don't underestimate them. Don't whatever them. Just take them as being serious, because they will show up and they'll be poised. They'll do the right things. The technique's going to be right, regardless of the talent gap against Texas. So you never know.
100% accurate. 100% accurate. Oh, and you know, real quick, if I may.
Sure.
I think last time I was on here, we were kind of discussing how, you know, Oregon State, Washington State, they didn't really talk about them being in the Big 12. I was wrong. I'm glad that I was wrong, because they're a pretty good brand of football. The Pac-12 has been so amazing this year. Shout out to Brett Yormark on getting the deal done when he did, because right now the Pac-12 looks pretty good and the Big 12 looks pretty average. So this has been a breath of fresh air. I hope Washington State and Oregon State can be in the conference here before too long.
Now that the Pac-12 has fallen apart, more has come out about how it fell apart, and it's really pathetic that a league that is now this good allowed itself to be picked off and picked apart and put itself in that. They weren't victims. They allowed that. Yeah. They could have picked apart the Big 12. They could have been. They didn't understand the landscape of the sport. They just didn't understand it. And then they overvalued themselves, and they made every possible bad move in the last 2 or 3 years.
Well, you know what? I this also pains my heart, but there might be some similarities to Mike Gundy when you have that exact same conversation, right? Just thinking that you have things under control to such a degree that you kind of forget what got you there in the first place, and you forget to maintain it. That's my fear out of Stillwater, is Gundy just got a little complacent, got a little too far removed from the locker room, the players, recruiting, NIL, all of it. And I don't know if he can reel it back in. The season's going to be very, very telling. Very telling.
Cody Stovall, follow him on Twitter. You see the Twitter handle right there. All Day O State, Locked On Oklahoma State on YouTube. Anything else that people need to know?
That's it, man. We're available on every single podcasting platform. Obviously, visual on YouTube. Find me on Twitter at All Day O State. Other than that, I like to keep life fairly simplistic.
Well, that's a good motto. I'm definitely give the thumbs up to that. Absolutely, keep it simple. Cody, appreciate you being here, and I apologize for the link arriving late. Thank you so much for your patience.
Absolutely. Thank you for the time. I greatly appreciate it, Mark. Yeah, I love what you do, man. Absolutely love what you do. And you're kind of a beacon for those of us that are trying to continue to grow in this industry. So thank you very much for your assistance, your support, and what you do for college football in general, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Good to see you. We'll have you back, and have a great college football weekend.
All right, brother. Yes. Yeah. Fingers crossed. All right. We need this one. We need this one.
We'll see you. All right. Good to see Cody. Good guy. Join him right there on All Day O State. That's the Twitter handle. We just threw together a little Big 12 live action here at the Voice of College Football. Wanted to catch up on the conference that may be the worst in college football. Yes, maybe. I think that's a bit overplayed. There is a postseason to be played both in bowl games and in a college football playoff. That Texas team is obviously the big hope of the Big 12 this year, but just kind of odd that on one hand, this game from a exposure standpoint, rating standpoint, and then the trajectory of these teams moving forward into the season, especially if they both look good. Let's say this is a well-played game between Texas and Oklahoma, that Oklahoma loses by a field goal, so it maintains the Texas credibility, but also lifts Oklahoma as, okay, we lost the game, but now people are respecting us because we just saw a team that some are considering to be the best in the country, and we took them to a 30-28 game. And so while this game is the biggest and baddest matchup for the conference for this season, not a good look and not a good thing for the conference going forward. Would love to see Texas and Oklahoma, I'm speaking as Brett Yormark, to falter, to bring in big TV ratings for the conference for 1 week, and then for them to implode and Kansas State and West Virginia and other teams to elevate. But that is not likely to happen, at least not to take both of those spots, as Cody just reminded us. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. When you use that link, it is going to be completely transparent to you. We've tested this with a zillion people. So grab the link, put it somewhere where you will remember it, the Amazon link in the description section. When you shop on Amazon, please remember the Voice of College Football and use our link. Also, we've got a ton of content out. Our bottom 10, check it out. Our top 25, that actually makes sense. Check it out. The Big Ten Live Show is our next show coming up. The Big Ten Live Show is at 6 Eastern. For you Big 12 folks that are in the heartland, 5 Central Time, the Big Ten Live Show right here at the Voice of College Football, and a huge matchup, Ohio State, Maryland, and other Big Ten talk coming up from 6 to 10 tonight, with John D'Adamo taking over the Ocho at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll see me back here at 6 Eastern. I'm off to record a segment with one Steve Dace, Michigan podcast, so be looking out for that video as well, right here at the Voice of College Football. And before I say farewell, let's see if there's anything in the chat. I don't believe so, but I appreciate everyone and the fine support. And as Jackson has left in the chat a number of times, the link to the Big 12 channel, it's in the description section of all the videos. Please, the SEC channel, the Big 12 channel, thank you so much for the people that have subscribed today. It's great content, so that's the main reason you should go there, is to check it out. But also, in addition to that, if you support what we do here at the Voice of College Football, that is a large portion of what we need to do. Continue to grow and expand, of course, right here at the Voice of College Football. See you at 6 Eastern.